Chapter 284. Just as Duque's 12th fireball hit Alicia's magic shield in a 3-on-1 situation, the shield, which should have lasted longer, suddenly exploded. Looking at the fireball that was heading straight for her, Alicia let out a cry of surprise. Everyone thought that Duque's fireball was about to destroy the flower, and there were even some apprentices who could not bear to see the beautiful Miss Berev disfigured. At this moment, Duque snapped his fingers and all the fireballs that flew out actually made an elegant circle in the air, circling 180 degrees and returned to Duque's side, floating in the air. Duque raised his hand and all the fireballs disappeared. Duque's voice sounded again, "I did not use other metamagic abilities to bully Miss Berev just now. This technique is actually similar to when people are facing the siege of 3 mages or magic apprentices who are of a lower level than themselves, and are often flustered by the enemy's continuous attacks. It's just that after mastering multicasting, you become the one fighting with the many." In order to leave a deeper impression, please take a look at the following footage. What Duque was showing on the magic screen was the footage of him using 108 hands of magic to rain down arcane missiles on the orc army at the Red Ridge Mountain, using the simplest arcane missiles to form an exaggerated barrage. The lowest level of magic caused the most gorgeous massacre. This kind of epic-making real war documentary gave the strongest psychological impact. Just 2 minutes of footage, more than 11,000 apprentices were mesmerized. Not every apprentice with magic aptitude had the opportunity to become an official mage. Below, in addition to those young faces, there were middle-aged magic craftsmen, white-haired human elders in their 70s or 80s, and high elves who did not have much aptitude but resolutely left their countries to seek the truth of magic. These people all had the same dream, the dream of making themselves stronger in magic. For a moment, too many people's breathing quickened. A hand was raised and Duque called his name, "Please speak." "Excuse me, does learning multicasting require specific talent?" This was the focus of everyone's attention. I can only say that those with talent will make faster progress in learning the supreme magical skills of multicasting. However, I believe that everyone can learn this technique after rigorous self-training. At the very least, it can greatly improve their spellcasting ability. Duque used a magic pen to write the words multitasking on the special magic board on the podium. The words were clearly reflected on the big screen. Multicasting is the most basic of the basics. If you have enough biological knowledge, you will know that whether it is humans or elves, the brain is actually divided into left and right parts. The left and right sides of the brain could actually coordinate, allowing the human body to make coordinated movements. In fact, the left and right sides of the brain can direct our left and right hands to make different movements and give different responses. With that, Duque showed it to everyone with the help of the system elf. At the same time, he drew a circle with his left hand and a square with his right. Looking at an extremely standard circle and a square at the same time, everyone thought it was easy at first, but later they were shocked to find that it was not as easy as they thought. Either the left and right hands drew both circles at the same time, or they drew both squares at the same time. The best was to draw 2 awkward patterns that were neither round nor square at the same time. There was never a lack of geniuses in this world, and soon someone succeeded. For example, Jaina, she easily drew a circle and a square at the same time in the air with the arcane energy flowing out of her fingers. Apart from her, more than 10 people succeeded one after another. Not only were there official mages but there were also magic apprentices. At this moment, Duque stopped. "I'm glad that many students succeeded. Because time is limited, please practice in this direction on your own. I can give you a simple standard. The second stage is this." Shamelessly, Duque gave his right hand to himself and his left to the system elf. Then both hands started at the same time. The left hand drew a more complicated polygonal pattern, while the right hand drew an arc of different radius. The third stage. At this time, his left hand drew a Dalajan-style architectural pattern, while his right hand sketched directly at Alicia. Alicia's face turned red. "In the end, when you can do what I did, it will be perfect." Duque used both his left and right hands to silently write the incantation. It was the incantation for the simplest, fireball, and frost arrow. These 2 completely different sentences made the audience gasp in amazement. Not only the apprentices, but even the official mages had to admire Duque's nature-defying abilities. Prince Kale, that's who also mastered multicasting, also revealed a thoughtful expression. To be honest, Kale, that's could also blast out a few fire spells at the same time, but it would undoubtedly weaken the power of his magic, and it would be difficult to coordinate. Duque's training method undoubtedly gave Kale, that's a lot of inspiration. It was no exaggeration to say that Kale, that's ability to practice this was due to his talent. Now, what Duque proposed was a more systematic training method with clear goals. Another apprentice raised his hand. Lecturer Marcus, may I ask how to satisfy the need to recite the incantation? I only have one voice. The more naive question was also the key to multicasting. Those arrogant big shots split into several voices in their own spiritual sea and fulfilled this request. Duque had a more convenient method. Of course, the essence of spellcasting is to use the incantation to mobilize the magic power in the body and connect it to the elemental world or the outside world. Brilliant mages can do all this in their own spiritual world. But I have a simpler method, and that is to use echoes. Duque snapped his fingers and several walls made of arcane energy appeared in the void beside him. Duque said something casually and the echoes echoed throughout the venue. Echoes? He actually thought of creating echoes to complete the necessary steps of multicasting? Obviously, this was another epic-making genius idea. For a moment, the audience was in awe, and once again there was a thunderous applause. This time, the applause lasted for nearly a minute. Duque's hands pressed down, and it took a long time for the applause to gradually stop. Someone asked again. So, how to create echoes when casting? Duque smiled evilly. Sorry student, this is already a fee. I haven't thought about how to charge you, but it will be announced in 2 or 3 days. Suddenly there was another burst of laughter. Next Duque said a lot more. For example, he used the theory of thermodynamics to explain the flow of fire elements. Unknowingly 2 hours passed. Chapter 285. Duque, with the knowledge of a transmigrator and an engineering and equipment major, systematically explained to more than 10,000 people what fire was, the nature of fire, and the characteristics of fire. For the magic apprentices in the world of Azeroth, this was an almost new theoretical system, but it did not conflict with the magic knowledge they had learned before. They were simply fascinated by it. Some official mages wanted to find Duque's faults and refute Duque, but they could not find a single flaw in his words. For example, heat will only flow from a high temperature to a low temperature. For example, if the temperature of a fire is high, it can heat up cold water. These seemingly easy to understand things, after being systematically explained by professional thermodynamics theory, almost all magic apprentices realized that their fireball would definitely improve. Fireball was not to be underestimated. As the first damaging spell that most magic apprentices learned, the popularity of fireball could be said to be 100%. It was no exaggeration to say that the thermodynamics theory that Duque had brought over had an obvious effect on the improvement of the magic level of the entire Dalagen. When the last grain of sand in the magic hourglass that was specially used to measure time fell and a pleasant hum sounded on the podium, Duque just happened to say, "Today's class ends here. My lecture is over." His timing was so precise that he did not seem like a young man at all, but the most experienced teacher. For a moment the audience was in an uproar. Lecturer Marcus, don't stop so quickly. Speak more. Speak more. We still want to listen. Lecturer, that's great. After a brief uproar, everyone seemed to realize that Duque would definitely not delay the class. Immediately, there was an earth-shattering applause in the huge auditorium. Clap, 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 clap. The applause was like an endless tsunami, lasting for a long time. Apart from the unlucky few who left early in the morning due to injuries, every magic apprentice, every official mage who came to listen to the lecture, and of course Kale, that's all stood up and gave Duque the most sincere applause. After the applause stopped, Kale, that's had already come to the podium with a bright smile on his face. Wonderful, Duque, your lecture has completely exceeded the limits of my imagination. I thought you were best at actual combat, but I didn't expect your theoretical knowledge to be just as rich. I can't even tell if you're a practical or an academic. Although Kale, that's really wanted to ask if these theories came from Mediva's Karazhan library, asking now would undoubtedly help Duque start a fight. Kale, that was simply happy for Duque. On the other side, Jaina had already become a fan. She chased after Duque and asked him all sorts of questions in admiration. Brother Marcus, do you accept disciples? Why don't I become your disciple? Right now, Jaina was still a rather innocent girl. Her watery blue eyes made it easy for people to feel sorry for her, so she agreed immediately. Don't you worship Antonidas? Duque blurted out. How did you know? Only then did Duque realize that he had spilled the beans, but it was easy to make up for it. Who in the Dalagen doesn't worship Master Antonidas? That's true. But Master is very busy. Recently he said he was injured, but everyone knows that he's actually in the laboratory every day. A flock of non-existent crows flew over Duque's head. Antonidas, Can you be more professional at pretending to be sick? Even a 12-year-old girl knows that you're pretending. Of course, Duque had no interest in provoking Jaina. Leaving aside her vacillating personality between war and peace, Duque had no confidence in teaching Jaina. He knew his own business. Duque was not a pure academic. Duque himself was half-baked in the real magic theories of this world. Even if Duque was unhappy with Jaina, who had cursed his father to death in the history, Jaina was still one of the more capable heroes in the history of the Alliance. She would be a core existence in too many major events in the future. Messing with Jaina's growth would make the future even more uncontrollable. Duque grandly refused. My apologies, Princess Proudmoore. I'm actually very busy. This time, I'm here mainly to visit Master Antonidas and help Stormwind recruit some mages to rebuild the Stormwind Royal Mages. At this time there were many people in front of the stage. When everyone heard this they immediately understood. Duque did not hide his purpose. The world of mages was about equivalent exchange. Cheating was a bad idea. Duque smiled and turned to Lucia. My assistant, I'll leave the answer to my questions about accepting disciples to you. Become my disciple or assistant, and you will receive my guidance and the right to read the bottom 3 levels of the Karazhan Grand Library for free. The price is to join the Stormwind Royal Mages as my disciple, and fight for the Alliance in Stormwind for 3 years. Just like joining the Dalajan Mages could get all kinds of benefits, Duque's recruitment was also very open. It was both a risk and an opportunity. When she heard that she had the obligation to fight, Jaina knew that she had no chance. Her father would not allow the underage Jaina to get involved in the war. In fact, Dailin had already informed her that if the Dalajan was in danger, there would be a specialized group of mages that would teleport her back to Kul Tiras in the shortest time possible. Jaina sighed. Looks like I can only wait until this war is over before I have the chance to visit Marcus. Duque smiled and did not say anything. After the lecture, Duque was immediately captured by Antonidas. When he came to Antonidas' laboratory again, the white-haired old man did not treat Duque so well. Oh Duque, this is not very kind of you. You will weaken the Dalajan's war potential. Duque shrugged his shoulders. Of course, he knew that even though the Dalajan had always pursued a liberal policy, where the nobles of other countries could hire any apprentice or official mages who had not signed a slave contract, that was during times of peace. Now was the time between the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Of course, the Dalajan had its own considerations. Duque's blatant recruitment would not cause any problems on the surface, but he was afraid that the Kirin Tor Parliament would make things difficult for the Alliance. Duque bowed deeply. For the future and war potential of the Dalajan, I am willing to make 1,000 copies of Karazhan's magic books and give them to the Great Dalajan Library. Antonida's long white eyebrows twitched. 5,000 copies, 100 mages, 300 apprentices. 2,000 copies, 500 mages, 1,000 apprentices. Why don't you just rob them? The Kirin Tor Parliament's president was furious. Wrong, it's easy to rob them. Duque obviously knew the importance of those magic books. He was not worried that Antonidas would not take the bait. Knowledge was power. No, that's too many. At most, 200 mages and 500 apprentices. Thus, the two of them, who could shake the Alliance with just a stomp of their feet, began to bicker like antis in the market in this laboratory where there were no outsiders. The final price was 3,000 copies of magic books in exchange for 200 official mages and 500 apprentices. Chapter 286. In the Hillsbrad Hills there was a stone castle standing on a hill. This was the temporary palace of the Stormwind royal family. Almost every day new decorations were brought into the castle, be it rockery or beautiful marble statues, or replacing the previously terrible floor tiles. King Lang repeatedly said that the kingdom did not have the financial surplus to pay the stonemasons' wages. The stonemasons expressed their gratitude towards Duque for saving their lives. Since they had nothing to do in the winter after building the blockhouses, they could find some stones to practice with. However, the stonemasons also expressed that when rebuilding Stormwind City in the future, they still needed to pay the required wages, but only at the cost price. Lang expressed his agreement. Looking at the so-called refugee camp that was becoming more and more prosperous, Lang was quite speechless. It was already quite inappropriate to call this a refugee camp. It was completely the prototype of a new city. The 3-meter-high stone wall could accommodate 3 people walking side by side, protecting nearly 500,000 residents. The newly cultivated fields in the distance were all protected by huge wooden fences. Every 300 meters or so, There was a wooden 10-meter-high arrow tower that could monitor all directions of the fields without any blind spots. There was nothing lacking in the city. The market, medical, sanitation, fire protection, water supply, city guards, and all the other buildings were arranged in an orderly manner. In a city that lacked money, there was no such thing as the state taking care of everything. All food and daily necessities had to be exchanged through labor. About 30% of the food harvested in the autumn was handed over to the Ministry of Civil Affairs of Storm Kingdom, except for the portion that was necessary for each family. In return, the Ministry of Civil Affairs would issue a batch of vouchers with a stamp and an equivalent amount of money. These vouchers could be used to exchange for cloth and other daily necessities at the market. The rest of the work was similar. Whether it was logging or mining, all supplies were collected in proportion, and the workers received vouchers as wages for the rest. Despite the obvious lack of money, the entire refugee camp was like a self-sufficient independent kingdom, operating extremely well. It was completely unimaginable that half a year ago, this was a group of refugees who had almost given up on life in the future. One day in December, looking at the black smoke rising from the chimneys in the city, Lang felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. On this day, Anduin Lothar returned. Lang and Anduin gave each other a warm hug. Anduin, what's the situation? Sigh, in winter, I, the commander of the Alliance, am a beggar holding a broken jar and going around begging. I only got a bunch of promises that I don't know if they'll be fulfilled. There's nothing substantial at all. It was precisely because there was no one else that Anduin could complain so presumptuously. A promise is better than no promise at all. Lang asked a servant to bring him a cup of hot wine. When Anduin first came in, he did not see it clearly. Seeing that the room was already very presentable, Anduin clenched his fists. Damn it, am I seeing things? Why do I feel like I've returned to Storm Fortress? It does look like it, doesn't it? Lang shrugged. I didn't force the stonemasons to make these things. Anyway, it's Duque's favor. Anduin combed his hair with his fingers. Sigh, compared to him, I feel that my diplomatic skills are terrible. Yes, what good news does that kid have? Is a new team of mages from the Storm King family considered good news? 200 official mages and 500 mage apprentices. Although they've only signed a 3-year contract. Lothar's eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Is old man Antonidas willing to let them go? Duque said that he used a copy of Karazhan's magic book to exchange for them. I don't know anything about magic. Anyway, what he said was true. Since Stormwind had put in so much effort to help collect it, it's definitely worth it to exchange a dungeon for these people. Of course, I agree. Agree. Oh my god, that kid is too impressive. Lothar patted Lang's shoulder hard. Ryan had a faint bitter smile on his face. What? You're still not happy? If this goes on, there's hope for us to recover Stormwind. Lothar said as he gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. Anduin, actually, I've been thinking. If we can recover Stormwind, why don't we give Duque the title of king? This topic was a little too heavy, and Lothar could not react for a while. Think about it. We all know that Duque is actually not from Stormwind. But how much has he done for us? Without him, perhaps there would only be 10,000 to 20,000 refugees left in Stormwind. I would have died in Stormwind City long ago, either at the hands of Garona or with Stormwind City. I know that you'll take good care of William for me. Maybe you'll also become the commander of the Alliance. But how much authority do you have? You don't even have an army under your direct command. Even if you lead the Alliance to defeat the Horde in the future, how many people will help you and William restore the country? But, look outside, Anduin. Outside the window were 500,000 well-fed citizens of the Storm Kingdom, who could safely survive the winter, and 100,000 elite soldiers who were full of morale and were willing to die for the kingdom. Before the arrival of winter, perhaps more citizens who had gone to other countries will rush back. This is all possible with Duque's help. Duque's ability is not inferior to any founding ruler in human history. At this point, Lang fell silent. That was the truth. The stability of the South Shore refugee camp had attracted the citizens who had previously left. The soldiers that had been lost in the Battle of South Shore had also been quickly replenished. If it weren't for the difficulty of raising soldiers, it would not be impossible to gather all the young and strong people to form an army of 200,000. Of course, all the young and strong people in the refugee camp had begun to receive military training. There were still plenty of reserve soldiers. Thoradin the Great is great, but as the capital of the Arathar Empire, the torrential fort declined after a short period of time. The other city-states have become independent kingdoms, such as Rotterdam and the Dalajan. There are still many enemies for humans. If this is an unstoppable trend, why not just let them go? Have you asked Duque? Anduin suddenly asked. No. But you can imagine that Duque also has subordinates and Duque also has people who support him. When that time comes, it won't be a matter of whether Duque wants to or not. Lang sighed again. I who once destroyed a country have thought through everything now. Anyway, I will go with the flow. After the restoration of the country, Duque can be conferred the title of king if he wants. If he doesn't want to be conferred the title of king, I will give him the treatment of a prince, and I will set up a national policy that will be passed on to William and his future descendants. It will be enough if Stormwind can preserve most of the elven forest. All right, I also agree to it. It depends. Lothar finally nodded. Chapter 287. The harsh winter left most people with nothing to do. Of course, Duque would not waste this time. In the Hillsbrad Hills, in a huge wooden hall, there were many veterans who had experienced the war with the orcs. They might not be able to fight on the battlefield due to various injuries, but they used their own words and deeds to teach the new soldiers how to face the orcs. Not only that, the Nagas under Duque were once again put to use, continuing to train the soldiers with similar battles. In Karazhan, Duque finally had the time to come back, and then Khadgar ran away in tears. Master, I miss you so much. I'm bored to death. Duque used all his strength to resist, using his hand to stop Khadgar's crying soul. Damn it, oh no, you're a ghost. You're not the only one here. Where's Michael? The Einherjars are all here. I have nothing to talk to those muscular men. I really don't understand why they still run every day when they're already Einherjars. Duque was speechless. It's probably because they have nothing to do if they don't fight demons, right? Duke suddenly understood why the upper nobles of the High Elves were so decadent. With unlimited life force, a boring life was the easiest to corrode the soul. Okay, get ready. I have a large group of apprentices coming, living people. Duque told Khadgar about how he had kidnapped a group of mages in the Dalajan. Yes, master, I will ask Michael and the others to clean up the room. Actually, I don't plan to let them stay in Karazhan for too long. After all, Karazhan is in a crack in space and time. I don't know if living here for a long time will have any negative effects on their bodies. I plan to let them come to the library 3 times a week to borrow and return magic books. You just need to be a good librarian. Open up the library for books below the earth mage level to them. Khadgar's soul put its hands on its hips. Okay, at least I won't be so lonely. Those who came to follow Duque were naturally not high-level mages. The official mages were all earth mages from relatively poor backgrounds. They could neither become a famous teacher like Krasis, nor could they afford the exorbitant tuition fees. One had to know that everything in the Dalajan was equivalent exchange. Even if one were to sell oneself to the Dalajan mages, the money obtained would only be enough to read a limited number of magic books. How could it compare to the unlimited reading in Karazhan? Besides, he could attend Duque's lectures 3 times a week in Hillsbrad's classroom. In fact, Duque wasn't fooling them. Duque's simplified fire elemental magic formulas that the system elves had deduced could allow their strength to improve greatly. The simplest example was that after training, every official mage would be pleasantly surprised to find that they had begun to master the 2 metamagic abilities, Enhanced Fireball and Flame Throw. The former could shorten the chanting time of their fireball spell, while the latter could increase the range of their fireball spell. 4 ordinary mages with mediocre aptitudes, this alone was enough for them to work for 3 years. After the hearts of the mages were settled, Duque finally began to build his ice circuit. Crown of Ice, the core magic circuit of Archmage Antonidas. In this era, apart from Medivh, who had just died, who was a true demigod mage who specialized in all 3 elements, the other 2 mages had typical preferences. The Sun King, an Astrian Sunstrider, was fire. Antonidas was ice. However, whether or not the magic circuits of these 2 supreme magicians could be fused was a very serious problem. Because the circuits of both were quite domineering. The arcane fire circuit was not an ordinary circuit. In fact, after using it for a long time, Duque suddenly realized that the arcane fire circuit should be called the arcane flame circuit. What was arcane? Arcane was the phoenix that had been hidden by Kael. That's the real name of the arcane fire circuit passed down in the Sunstrider family should be Phoenix Flames. Why did the Sun King know that Aurelia had lost the cultivation method of the Phoenix Flames magic circuit, but only punish Aurelia for 3 months? Why did Antonidas give away the model of the top-tier Crown of Ice magic circuit just like that? Was Janus Barov really that important? Duque had carefully considered this question before. Recently, the system genie had given Duque an answer. There were no problems with these two sets of magic circuit models, nor were there any flaws. As a foundation, these were the best ice and fire circuits. The crux of the matter was that when advancing to a higher level, a specific item was needed. A core item that could allow fire or ice elements to be further sublimated. Simply put, it was a flame origin comparable to Kale, that's Phoenix, Arcane, or an ice origin of the same level. Otherwise, advancing to Morning Star was the limit of this circuit. Perhaps Duque could beat some Radiant Moon mages with the help of the system, but he would never be able to attack a true Breaking Dawn. Duque suddenly smiled bitterly. The old guys are really smart. Antonidas did not give Duque an arcane magic circuit, but it did not matter. The original Phoenix Flames also had an arcane circuit model. As a fire magic with explosive damage output, it required more arcane magic support, so the arcane model of Phoenix Flames was still very strong. The system estimated that unless he wanted to advance to a Radiant Moon mage, this arcane model was definitely enough for Morning Star. If a Phoenix's fire elemental source was installed in the Phoenix Flames circuit, then the fire circuit would squeeze Duque's arcane circuit like a juicer. When that time came, a new source of arcane magic would also be necessary. Alright, let's take it one step at a time. In the highest level of Karazhan, Duque set up a series of protective spell formations. These were things he had learned from the books in Karazhan. It was not enough to defend against true experts, but Morning Stars were not a problem. With Karazhan's own defenses, it was still very safe. System notification detected that the host has a large amount of professional knowledge related to refrigeration. Relevant knowledge is being imported. Thermodynamic fundamentals, hydrodynamic pumps and fans, refrigeration principles and equipment, air conditioning principles and equipment, refrigeration process design, refrigeration and air conditioning automation, refrigeration and air conditioning engineering. Knowledge import complete. Optimizing the magic circuit model of Crown of Ice. Optimization complete. Beginning modification of the host's original magic model. The next moment, Duque felt as if he had fallen from a warm world into an icy hell. Chapter 288. The three-element pharaoh was a freak. However, in Duque's memories, only Medivh and Khadgar were three-element pharaoh. The rest were mostly fire or ice. Even though the system elf had fully calculated the possible consequences of practicing the Crown of Ice, and considered the possibility of fire and water being incompatible, Duque had still severely underestimated this. Logically speaking, the Phoenix Flames, which had the home advantage, should have the absolute upper hand. Thus, before reorganizing his arcane spell circuit and adding the Crown of Frost, Duque deliberately weakened the arcane spell circuit's supply of arcane energy to the flame spell circuit. What Duque did not expect was that the optimized Crown of Ice would actually turn the tables on him and take the initiative to snatch all the energy ports of the arcane circuit. What the F***CK? Duque cursed, a system elf? Why is the Crown of Ice suppressing the Phoenix Flames? Aren't the two circuit models of the same level? Oh dear host, let me calculate for a moment. Beep, calculation completed. It seems to be because the Phoenix Flames is the basic version for beginners, while the Crown of Ice is the advanced version for advancing wizards. The latter is more complete. In order for the host to advance to a Morning Star wizard, the Crown of Ice has begun to absorb all the energy in the surroundings for advancement. Duque suddenly realized that not only had the icy circuit cut off the energy source of the Phoenix Flames, this overbearing magic model had actually begun to erode the fire circuit, attempting to transform it into ice. Wait. If this goes on, what will happen to my magic circuit? Beep, the latest deduction. If the host is unable to control the spread of the icy circuit, after advancing to the Morning Star realm, the icy circuit will dominate all circuits except the most basic arcane circuit, and will prevent other types of circuits from being produced in the host's body. At this moment, Duque's heart skipped a beat, as if it had been petrified by magic. Then a gust of wind blew, turned to ash. Damn it. Without another word, Duque flipped the table in his mind. What happened to the three-element pharaoh? How could ice magic alone be enough? There was no good ending for those who were partial to certain subjects. Thinking back to history, weren't all the ice mages who specialized in the ice element beaten up in the end? Antonidas was pushed by Arthes. Kel, Thuzad, who had become a frost lich, was pushed down by 40 players. Jaina's defense of Mount Hyjal could not withstand Archimonde's frenzied attacks. No, I don't want a simple frost circuit. Then, I can only ask the host to enter his spiritual world and obtain complete control of the crown of ice. However, this is very dangerous. If the host fails, your soul may forever be trapped in the depths of your own spiritual sea. You will become an existence equivalent to a vegetable. Whatever fortune is found in danger, this young master will risk it all. The next second, Duque's entire consciousness was sucked into a magical illusory world. Duque looked up at this lonely peak and was speechless for a long time. He thought that Mount Hyjal in the world of Azeroth was majestic, and Mount Everest, where people fell to their deaths every year before he transmigrated, was steep. However, in front of this lonely peak that stood tall in Duque's spiritual world, they all had to prostrate themselves. Duque did not know if he should call this lonely peak a mountain, because this was completely beyond the scope of natural scenery. This snow-white lonely peak in his spiritual world was completely the pillar of the world, supporting the entire world. Duque was on a platform at the foot of the mountain. Behind him was a bottomless abyss with rolling clouds and mist. In front of him was this peerless peak that struck one's heart and shocked Duque. The only thing that allowed Duque to see his target was the cold white light that kept flashing above the clouds. An inexplicable voice was attracting Duque, telling Duque that it was the most precious pearl on the crown of ice. He had lost contact with the system elf. Obviously, the strongest king system could do nothing about this internal magic world that went deep into the depths of Duque's spiritual world. Duque took a deep breath and all that seeped into his lungs was cold water vapor. Duque suddenly realized that he had to reach the top of this straight lonely peak. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. But how was he going to climb up this mountain without any tools? Suddenly, he found that on the cliff of the lonely peak, there was a small opening at the top of every 20 centimeters that sprayed out water mist. Water mist? This is the spiritual world that the crown of ice created for me? This, Duque suddenly understood. When he reached the edge of the platform, Duque said in a low voice, "Ice seal." The ice circuit that existed in an unknown part of his body suddenly rotated at a high speed, absorbing the surrounding cold aura and turning it into ice elements, gathering under Duque's feet. In less than 1/100th of a second, the water vapor that sprayed out, mixed with the ice elements, actually turned into an extremely stable staircase that stuck to the cliff of the lonely peak and extended out for about a meter. It just so happened that this staircase was actually stepped on by Duque. Duque looked up at the sky. If he followed the place where the water vapor sprayed out to make ice stairs, he really couldn't count how many steps he would have to make from here to the top of the mountain. However, Duque could clearly feel that in his body, or rather, in the body that he had imagined in the spiritual world, the reconstructed ice circuit was cheering and jumping. It was constantly encouraging Duque to use it to make more stairs, or to use it anywhere that the ice circuit could be used. How long had passed? He didn't know. Duque's consciousness was numb and blurry. There was no hunger in his stomach. Instead, in the process of continuously using the ice circuit, Duque only felt that the aura of ice had penetrated his limbs and bones, becoming his body and his life. He lowered his head and looked down. As Duque continued to build and climb the mountain, he had already made an extremely long spiral staircase. Every step was crystal clear, as if it was carved from the purest white marble. On both sides of the long staircase, there were 2 exquisite ice handrails. Between each long staircase, there was an icicle that was as thick as a thigh connecting the north, south, east, and west directions. It seemed to be a support, but it also seemed to be a marker for Duque to calculate the number of laps for himself. In Duque's field of vision, the lonely peak became thinner and thinner as it went down. Finally, it turned into a straight black line that pierced deep into this world filled with water vapor. What was the end of this place? Duque suddenly realized that if this continued, he would be completely lost in this world. His consciousness, which had become muddled because of the ice, suddenly began to operate again. No. I'm here to conquer the crown of ice. No matter how beautiful the crown is, it's just a decoration on my head. The crown is only noble because of the identity of the king. It's not that I have to beg for the recognition of the crown. I, Duque, am you, the master of the crown of ice. I order you to either destroy me, or come out and fight me. Chapter 289. It seemed to be responding to Duque's shouts, but it also seemed to be acknowledging that Duque had truly laid the foundation of the ice circuit while continuously creating the stairs of ice. This cold world finally began to change. The white clouds that were rolling and surging under his feet seemed to have suddenly become violent. The movement that was like a gentle breeze and drizzle earlier became a turbulent wave. In the blink of an eye, the surface of the clouds bulged and formed a huge hill of water vapor. With a loud splash, the cloud layer that was supposed to be in a gaseous state suddenly turned into a liquid state in the blink of an eye. The clouds below turned into a sea that stretched to the horizon. Seeing that the sky had turned into the horizon, Duque was tongue-tied. Indeed, it was too stupid to focus on science or reason in the spiritual world. This huge lake that seemed to have as much water as the Lordaeron Mill Lake next to the Lordaeron capital seemed to have gathered together in just 3 seconds. A pair of incomparably huge arms made of pure lake water stretched out from the huge hill of water. Then, an eye that was even bigger than a carriage lit up on the huge hill of water. It was a water elemental that was even bigger than a titan. As the saying went, gentle as water. Sorry, this thing's temper did not seem to have the so-called gentleness of water at all. Instead, it was even more irritable than the fire dragon. It did not even shout, "Go to hell." With a wave of its arm, it smashed its arm toward Duque like a flying axe. Due to the problem of vision, as long as the distance was far enough, even the largest thing would still be small. Visually, the water elemental giant was only the size of a palm. However, when the water arm that was bent at a right angle approached, Duque could clearly estimate the size of the water ball in a real sense. He immediately cursed in his heart. This was a huge water weapon that was more than 50 meters long on one side and shaped like a boomerang. Duque could not think of how to describe this thing, but he was extremely sure that even if this thing did not cause fatal damage to him in the first attack, it would kill him in the subsequent second attack. That's right. A drop of water was nothing to a human. But to an ant, it was enough to drown the ant. Right now Duque was that ant. As a water elemental creature, it would definitely drown Duque in its most proficient water manipulation skill. Perhaps some people would say, would Duque drown now that he was a spiritual entity? Duque didn't know, but Duque's intuition told him that once he was hit, he would be done for. Dodge. Was dodging useful? It was impossible to estimate how many water elements were born after the sea of clouds turned into water. In Duque's peripheral vision, there were water elementals in the shape of muscular men showing off their prowess on the surface of the water around him. It was as if God had filled the entire reservoir with water and poured it down on Duque's head. The impact of the giant water boomerang was even more frightening than the collapse of a mountain. At this moment Duque flipped out. Do you think I'm a sick cat if I don't show my might? Duque didn't even know how many times the frost circuit in his body had spun. He only knew that it spun faster and faster. In the end, it became a shadow that the naked eye couldn't keep up with. Since this is the spiritual world. Since Crown of Ice wants to test me and show me how powerful you are. Since you, as a magic circuit, think that you can dominate such an awesome person like me, then show me your value. Duque seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be putting pressure on Crown of Ice through some sort of declaration. Extreme cold wave. Duque punched the stairs under his feet. Instantly, an unparalleled cold aura formed a fan shape and blasted toward the water boomerang. The moment before the collision, the boomerang folded into a piece and turned into a flat, crescent-shaped water blade. However, after the water blade and the extreme cold wave collided, there was an earth-shattering explosion. This was the collision of water and ice. Water did not have enough volume to destroy or devour everything like a raging wave. Instead, it was the cold aura that caused the water to change first. The huge water blade was broken by the ice chi, and the water that burst out didn't even have time to pour down to form a waterfall before it was frozen by the ice chi into sharp icicles and shot into the distance. It went straight for the water elemental giant that had thrown its arm out. The icicles pierced through the giant and nailed it to the ground. This should not be counted as nailing it to death. This was because the cold aura turned the entire giant into an ice sculpture that was as huge as a mountain. The corners of Duque's mouth curled up into a smile of understanding. Since this can be done, then, at this moment the huge water elemental giants around him went crazy. They no longer attacked individually. Instead, they dipped their arms into the lake together. In just a few breaths' time, Duque suddenly realized that the water giants had joined forces to set off an apocalyptic tsunami that engulfed the entire world. This was an apocalyptic tsunami in the truest sense. From the surface of the lake all the way to the sky, the vast and invincible seawater occupied Duque's entire field of vision. If he was an ordinary mortal, he would not even be able to imagine how he would break through it. Perhaps the only outcome would be to wait for death. Let this tsunami of despair destroy Duque's spirit. But who was Duque? A transmigrator. He had seen countless disaster movies, seen the White House that had been destroyed N times, and seen the Statue of Liberty that had been smashed N+1 times. Would he take this level of intimidation seriously? Tilting his head slightly, Duque spat out the words with a smirk, Ice Age? The ice circuit had formed an independent small universe in Duque's body. The cold aura inside was constantly splitting and multiplying like atomic fission. From 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, from 4 to infinity. Duque merely stomped his foot, and a cold aura that was even more terrifying than the apocalyptic tsunami instantly swept the entire world. When the huge wave arrived, there should have been a loud rumble caused by the vast body of water, but now there was only the sound of rapid freezing. The white wave quickly slowed down and advanced. The huge wave that should have been like a black hole or a whirlpool was still advancing. However, at the top of the wave, there were even more huge ice blocks that were as large as mountains. The ice blocks were churning, but when the ice blocks collided with each other, only ice crystals were scattered. The flowing water body became less and less. Finally, after 20 seconds, the roar of heaven and earth gradually subsided. What appeared in front of Duque was a frozen and dead world. At this moment, everything suddenly disappeared. The surroundings turned into a pitch-black void, and a pure white and gorgeous crown appeared in front of Duque. A magnetic neutral voice said, "Wear me and I will grant you the supreme power of ice." Chapter 290. After going through so many hardships, traversing almost endless stairs, overturning a huge amount of water elements, he finally arrived in front of the crown of ice, and was bestowed with the power of ice. Well, if Duque was really born and raised in Azeroth, he might have eagerly put on the crown. Unfortunately, Duque wasn't. At this time, whoever wore it would automatically have the aura of a moron. Not only would it be a trap for himself, but it would also trap others. Oh, a demon from the crack of space and time. I don't know what you are. But if you want to trick me, it's too simple. Duque laughed coldly. That's right. The crown of ice was a magic circuit model, and it was impossible for it to have so many twists and turns. The only explanation was that something had snuck into Karazhan and was lying in ambush in this place with the most arcane energy, waiting for its prey to take the bait. It was very likely that it wasn't its main body, because if it was its main body, it wouldn't be able to hide from Khadgar and Duque's defense and alarm circles. But a trace of a soul was a different story. This was Karazhan, located above the crack in the astral plane. It wouldn't be strange for anything to sneak in. After all, Duque didn't have enough power and time to completely clean up this place. Fortunately, Duque had always been vigilant. In the next instant, the crown of ice suddenly had a master. A lich whose lower body was floating in the air like a few flower petals, and her upper body was covered in chains that kept spinning back and forth. She wore a purple, black and red magic robe, and her skull was in the shape of a skull. She used her claws to wear the crown of ice. For some reason, this evil existence that appeared in Duque's spiritual world was a little familiar. Beside her, a group of warriors with purple eyes, wearing black and purple heavy armor, and a large group of people in purple and black robes, who were neither human nor ghost, all knelt on one knee and placed their left hands on their chest, showing their utmost respect to the current owner of the crown of ice. Mortal, you don't understand the power and terror of the Burning Legion at all. Do you think that temporarily trapping the great Commander Sargeras will stop the Burning Legion from conquering the world of Azeroth? You're too naive. Nothing can stop the Burning Legion, not even the Creation Titans. Not to mention an ant like you? You have obstructed the Burning Legion time and time again, and you even intend to support the resistance to unite. You are seeking your own death. I am the daughter of Frost, the incarnation of death, the great dead speaker. 7 gigantic ice-blue magic circles spread out with her palm as the center. One was directly behind her, and the other 6 were distributed in a hexagonal pattern. As soon as she finished speaking, the magic array trembled inexplicably. Bang! Countless icicles shot out from the center of the magic array, and pierced through Duque's entire body with ease. Duque was like a chicken wing waiting to be roasted, waiting for the Death Whisper Lady to judge his fate. Duke Marcus. Lady Death Whisperer's voice stopped for a moment. How heavy is the sin of stopping the Burning Legion? You should have been roasted by the flames of hell for 10,000 years. But on account that you are young and ignorant, so I'll give you a chance. Submit to me, or your soul will suffer eternal torture. At this moment, Duque, who was supposed to be dying, suddenly raised his head. There was an indescribable straightforwardness on his face, and his eyes flashed. Fool, if I'm really frightened by an illusion of your level in my spiritual world, I might as well drown myself in a bucket of tofu. Impudent. Lady Death Whisper was furious. She summoned an iceberg and threw it at Duque. However, Duque did not even blink. It was as if he was waiting for the iceberg to crush him. He raised his right hand at lightning speed and grabbed the peak of the iceberg. The next second, the iceberg disappeared, and in its place was an ice-colored whip that extended from Lady Deathwhisper's hand to Duke's. "I've caught you." Duke's face was filled with joy as if he had succeeded. With a light tug, he tore the illusion into pieces. The terrifying collapse extended from the whip to Lady Deathwhisper, and even the believers and zealots around her. "Ah, no!" Lady Deathwhisper let out an earth-shattering scream, and then she and her minions all began to disintegrate. Like a weathered statue, every part of their body, every cell, turned into sand and quickly dissipated into the void. At the same time, a strong fluctuation suddenly came from the void portal on the first level of Karazhan. An ice chain that came from somewhere inside Karazhan suddenly whipped fiercely, pulling out an ice-blue female demon that was 2 people tall from the void portal. Michael, the Einherjar, immediately drew his sword from his waist, raised it high and shouted, "Enemy attack!" At the same time, Duke's voice came from the Karazhan space. "Khadgar, take care of her." "As you command," Khadgar said politely, which was rare for him. Then there was the tragic story of a group of Einherjars, a Einherjar mage and a boss named Curator, beating up another boss who didn't bring any minions and relied on them for food. Duke didn't care. He didn't even want to know why Lady Deathwhisper, the boss that should only appear in Ice Crown Fortress in the future, suddenly appeared here. And why Lady Deathwhisper was now just a demon. The things that appeared in the astral plane rift had no logic or science to begin with. If he continued to investigate, he would only become mentally ill. When Duke found that he was connected to the system elf again, the construction of the ice circuit magic model in his body was back on track and under control. Duke looked inside his body through the system. Now, his magic circuits were finally starting to look decent. Each huge circuit had countless thin, thread-like circuits. They were like a bundle of wires tied into a circle, and the countless small circuits formed a huge circuit. The 3 huge circuits of ice, fire, and arcane were like 3 connected rings. They were connected to each other and had their own independent sides, but sometimes they complemented each other. Although Crown of Ice and Phoenix Flames could directly draw power from the elemental realm, they also relied on the most core arcane circuit to support them. Before practicing Crown of Ice, only the arcane and fire circuits of Duke were relatively strong. If he used too much ice magic, it would lose its strength. Now it was completely different. Now that there were 3 circuits, it was truly a trident. A surging and indescribable power rose from Duke's chest. This power was different from any power that Duke had encountered before. Not only was it stronger, more refined, and purer, but it was also more independent. Could it be that this was a morning star? Chapter 291. Duke had already touched that boundary. For the first time, the boundary between a sky wizard and a morning star wizard was clearly presented in front of Duke. Duke knew that as long as he continued to push hard, this boundary would collapse in front of him. However, Duke hesitated. Not enough. Not enough. This was Duke's intuition. Some people said that intuition might not be reliable. As a cultured university student, Duke had once seen an introduction like this. Some people might feel that something is wrong at some point, but their rationality told them that there was nothing wrong. However, the alarm in their hearts would ring. Why was that? In fact, this was the brain sending out an alarm to the core of one's rationality based on certain information from the past. The brain would judge that something was wrong from the visual and other sensory signals it received. For example, when thunder was about to strike, one's hair would stand on end and one's scalp would feel numb. In fact, the brain had already sent out an alarm. If one still did not believe in this kind of intuition, one would be courting death. Now it was the same for Duke. The Crown of Ice was clearly fine, so why did he not continue? In his brain, alarm bells rang incessantly. Duke almost stopped the high-speed flow of the 3 magic circuits at the last moment, stopping at the last moment that he could stop the upgrade. System Elf, help me analyze this. If I want to fully unleash the power of the frost or flame circuits, will there be any problems? The System Elf replied, beep. After testing, there are no problems. On the current basis, the Crown of Ice and Phoenix Flames circuits can both unleash their respective effects perfectly. Wait, something doesn't seem right? Wait, system. What if I want to unleash the power of the frost and flame circuits at the same time? Flame and frost are conflicting elemental abilities. It is strongly recommended that the host not use these 2 elements at the same time. I insist. Calculate it for me, Duke shouted. Host, this is not scientific. At this moment, Duke finally vaguely felt what was wrong. Bullsh asterisk T. In this fantasy world, not every scientific principle makes sense. Mages have the awesome spell Frostfire Arrow. Beep. Beep. After simulation host, your arcane circuit is unable to meet the output requirements of 2 top-level magic circuits at the same time, and there will be an unstable state. Beep. After calculation you can only unleash 66.7% of the Frostfire Arrow's power at full power. Duque slapped his forehead, his back drenched in cold sweat. He must have been out of his mind to have forgotten about this. That's right, these 2 top-level magic circuits were complete. 100 points of fire was supported by 150 points of arcane circuits. Similarly, 100 points of frost could also receive this support. Perhaps the arcane circuit that matched Phoenix Flames wasn't perfect, but it could still hold on. The crux of the matter was that it was impossible for an arcana circuit of 150 points to sustain 100 points of fire and 100 points of frost at the same time. Considering the surplus, it was necessary to have at least 250 points of arcana circuit. If he really wanted to become the magic god of 3 practitioners of magic that he dreamed of, he had to further optimize and upgrade the arcane circuits that were the basic suppliers. This wasn't going to be easy. Duque didn't know if Medivh had recorded a magic model of this level. He probably had, but where was it? Was it recorded in the legendary artifact, Book of Medivh? *CK. Medivh didn't mention it when he died. Duque's face turned green on the spot. Did this thing not exist in this world? Or did Medivh deliberately leave behind a thought or a backup plan? Or did he leave it in the library? Hell, the Karazhan library contained 1.28 million magic books. If he could let the system elf scan it, it wouldn't be a problem to find it after reading it. But these were all magic books. The weaker ones could be scanned directly. The stronger magic books all came with their own magic restrictions. Duque did have the authority to open them, but he could only open them one by one. Otherwise, the magic books would trigger the restrictions and self-destruct. At this time, Khadgar returned. In his hand was a blue ball of light. Inside it was a struggling and howling soul. "Oh, my master, I haven't seen you for 2 months. Why did you provoke this thing the moment you woke up? Although she's only 1/3 of a demon's soul, she's not easy to deal with. My brothers are all slightly injured." "Wait, you said 2 months? What time is it now?" Didn't you say that the Alliance changed the year of the Beastmen invasion to the first year of the Dark Portal? Then it's the second year of the Dark Portal, February 10th. Oh, I saw that you were immersed in your own spiritual world, seeking a breakthrough, so I didn't dare to disturb you. Although your disciples have been looking for you many times. Duque's face turned green. He didn't think that he would stay in the spiritual world for more than 2 months. In March, spring would bloom. At that time he would have to devote himself to the war with the Beastmen again. He wouldn't have time to cultivate at all. Was he going to be stuck as a sky mage for another year? A low level of strength meant a greater risk. Duque gritted his teeth, his lips almost bleeding. Seeing Duque's ashen face, Khadgar cowered. He immediately discovered that Duque's aura was still at the sky mage rank. Although he was very close to the Morningstar realm, he hadn't crossed that line. Could it be that Duque had failed to break through to the Morningstar realm? This time, it was Khadgar's turn to be unable to remain calm. Venting his anger was the most terrifying. Not daring to touch Duque's bad luck, Khadgar hurriedly said, "Master, this fellow's soul is here. If you're unhappy you can just roast her soul to vent your anger. How about I let you kill the imprisoned demon for fun?" Duque was amused by Khadgar's words. "Bastard, do you think I'm such an unreasonable person? If I want to advance to the Morningstar realm I can do so at any time. This situation isn't ideal, so I'm just suppressing myself." Khadgar patted his chest, looking as if he had been relieved of a huge burden. "Alright, let me see if this fellow has any information." Duque stretched out his hand, using arcane energy to suck up 1/3 of Lady Deathspeaker's soul. Duque couldn't analyze the information within the soul, but the system elf could. By repeatedly reading the Eridar demon language floating in the shallow layer of the soul, Duque finally found what he wanted. He was suddenly ecstatic. Ah! Old Antonidas, you deserve to be beaten up by me. Ah! All of Karazhan reverberated with Duque's unbridled laughter. Chapter 292. The Dark Portal Year 2, 11th of February. In the Dalajan, Antonidas was feeling very angry. That's right, after he was cursed by Ghoul Dan last year, he was the first to study the power of curses. However, as more information on Orc Warlocks and Orc Death Knights was brought to the Dalajan, Antonidas suddenly realized that this was a taboo that humans should not touch. In the middle of last December, after an emergency discussion by the 6-member Kirin Tor Council, they voted 5-1 to seal all information on necromancy. They sealed everything and locked it in the Violet Library. They announced this decision to the entire Dalagen. The matter should have ended there, but in early January, Antonidas received a report that zombies were found in the frozen fields near the Dalagen. It was obvious that this was the work of a mage. Although the experimental subjects were just lab rats, these zombified animals caused the farmers around them to feel very uneasy. It also affected the reputation of the Dalagen mages. Antonidas ordered the mages to investigate this matter thoroughly, but to no avail. There could only be 2 reasons. 1. The person who did this was so clever that he could hide from the surveillance of the entire Dalagen and even the Kirin Tor Council. 2. This person was most likely a high-ranking mage in the Dalagen who used his power to hide everything. In his office, Antonidas glared at his secret agent. Necromancy must be banned. It was very simple. Although the Dalagen also had a school of necromancy, the mainstream values of human society rejected the existence of necromancy. Therefore, it was inevitable that the mages who were obsessed with necromancy were incompatible with the values of the Dalagen. Antonidas could not ignore the opinions of the majority for the sake of a single mage's experiment. At this time, the guard brought news of Duque's visit. Tell him that I'm busy. Previously, when Duque poached a large group of mages, he did receive a large number of unique magic books. However, they were all toy magic books with no practical value. There wasn't even a single valuable book that slipped through the net. There was a saying, when the water is too clear there are no fish. Obviously, Duque had gone through a strict selection process. Antonidas looked like he had been tricked, and now Duque was here again. The guard showed an awkward expression. But Sir Marcus wants me to tell you that this is a matter of great importance to the Dalagen's 1,000-year reputation and survival. Antonidas was shocked. He had dealt with Duque before. Of course, he knew that Duque was not the kind of person who did not know what was important. If he could say such serious words, it could only prove that Duque really had something important to tell him in person. All of you get out and let Duque in. Soon, only Antonidas was left in the room. Duque pushed the door open and entered. Marcus, your information better be as important as you say it is. Otherwise, I won't forgive you. Of course, if you are a friend of the Dalagen will definitely not be stingy in returning the favor. This was Antonidas' little trap. If Duque asked for a return, then it was definitely not a big deal. It also proved that Duque was not sincere enough. Duque waved his hand. It doesn't matter what the return is. What matters is what I show you. Duque took out a soul imprisoned in a magic device. After quickly reading the information in the soul, Antonidas' face suddenly changed. She didn't mention who it was. This may also be a false accusation. No, it just so happens that I know who he is. Duque took a deep breath. Sorry, in fact, I have a talent, the talent of detect evil. When I first saw Mediv, I found that there was a powerful demon possessing Mediv. At that time, I kept silent because I had no evidence, and even if I said it, no one would believe me. Antonidas was silent for a moment. He knew about the battle between Duque and Mediv. Why was it that so many people could not find out that Mediv was possessed, but Duque found out? This was a mystery that no one had solved. Now, Duque solemnly told him that everything he said was true. This gave Antonidas a bad feeling. In fact, before I came, I took the opportunity to visit some high-ranking Dalagen mages, and I finally found my target. Antonidas' face was already frosty. Duke Marcus, do you know what you are saying? I know what I am saying. I want to invite the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus Fail, here. He will provide evidence for my accusations. But before that, I strongly suggest that you contact the 2 counselors, Crasus and Kale. You are indeed powerful, but even you can't guarantee that you will be able to keep him here. All right. On the 12th of February, Kirin Tor Chairman Antonidas summoned all the Kirin Tor counselors and reserve counselors. For the upcoming war with the orcs, we need to meet again to discuss the arrangements. It was a very reasonable reason. No one suspected that there would be any problems. But when all the counselors arrived at the magic conference floating in the sky above the Dalagen city, they suddenly realized that the situation was a little strange. For daily affairs, the 6-member council was the highest decision maker. Unless it concerned the life or death of the Dalagen, or a change in the council, there would not be any backup counselors. This time, the 3 backup counselors sat in the spectator seats. When everyone had arrived, the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus, the Alliance's Deputy Commander Duque, and Paladin Uther arrived, filling the conference room with an ominous feeling. The magic circuits in Antonada's body circulated, surging mana spilling out of his body. The temperature of the entire conference room dropped by a full 10 degrees. The aged Breaking Dawn wizard slammed his hands on the magic table in front of him, causing a loud bang to ring out. First of all, please take off your masks. As the chairman, I, Antonidas, declare that we do not need these things today. Although they did not know why, they still did as they were told. They were not supposed to take off their magic masks in front of outsiders. The 3 backup counselors, 2 men and 1 woman, were all passers-by that Duque did not know. Antonidas placed his hands on the table, exuding an aura like that of a ferocious tiger. His voice shocked everyone present. There is a traitor among us. A traitor who colludes with the devil. Once these words were spoken, there was an uproar. Devil? Kale? That's and a few others stood up in shock. What the hell? There was actually a traitor who colluded with the devil in the Kirin Tor Council? Chapter 293. In the Tirisful Council, whose purpose was to fight against the demons and prevent mages from casting spells excessively, all the counselors were selected from the Silver Moon Council and the Kirin Tor Council. It could be said that these 2 councils were the vanguard of fighting against evil, and the stronghold of justice. Now, Antonidas publicly announced that someone in the Kirin Tor Council was colluding with the demons. Everyone's first reaction was that it was impossible. The next second, everyone's reaction was, this could really be true. If it wasn't to fight against the demons, why would they invite the Archbishop of Holy Light and the leader of the Paladins? Enough. Let the facts speak for themselves. Antonidas' angry beard calmed down a little, and he turned to look at the Archbishop of Holy Light. Archbishop Fail, please. Fail didn't refuse. Destroying evil is one of my lifelong wishes. Under Uther's protection, he walked to the center of the council hall and put his hands together. Suddenly, a dazzling holy star rose from the Archbishop's hands, and the holy light spread across the entire council hall. However, 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed, 10 seconds passed, and nothing happened. There were no screams of the demons, no leakage of evil energy, nothing at all. Archbishop Alonso's and Uther were a little stunned. They had been informed by Duque and Antonidas, and that was why they specially came here to subdue the demons. Now there was nothing at all? A drop of cold sweat dripped from Antonidas' forehead, and he couldn't help but look at Duque. It was because of Duque's exposure of Sargeras possessing the Mediv that Antonidas had almost unconditional trust in Duque. Now that there was a demon but they couldn't find it, wasn't this a great embarrassment? Of course, Duque deserved to die, but his authority as the chairman would also be greatly weakened. For a moment, Antonidas' relationship with Duque almost changed from trust to hatred. At this time, Duque slowly stood up and said in a calm voice, "There is no doubt that the demons are among us. I just want to tell everyone that times are advancing and so are our old enemies, the demons. 10,000 years ago, would anyone have thought that the Demon King would stoop to possess a human guardian?" Everyone's body shook simultaneously. Indeed, everyone was a little unhappy that Mediv had tricked the entire human race. Duque's words made everyone even more vigilant. Duque spoke again. Curse? An entirely new form of evil. The Undying. It was a non-living form that he had never seen before. The appearance of these 2 things is exactly what we need to be wary of. Therefore, when traditional demonic techniques are no longer effective, Archbishop FAO, please research new detection methods. Even though Duque had yet to prove that he was wrong, the meticulous Fail, who never lacked a sense of justice, nodded in agreement. In the human heart, there is rarely absolute justice or absolute evil. Therefore, the demons used this to deceive the detection of the holy light and achieve the purpose of infiltrating humans to continue spreading evil and undying beliefs. Actually, Archbishop, all you have to do is add the holy light into the spiritual attack. Fazio understood immediately. With a flip of his palm, waves of holy light once again spread throughout the entire hall. This time, one of the counselors finally bent over in pain. Ah! The skin on Kel Thuzad's poker face cracked inch by inch, revealing the pale, lifeless skin underneath. Even though Antonidas already knew the answer from Duque, he was still shocked speechless when he saw it with his own eyes. Beside Kel Thuzad, Prince Kale, That's and Krasis, who were already prepared, instantly opened up their defensive shields. One on the left and one on the right, they attacked together and blasted out more than 100 fireballs, shattering Kel Thuzad's magic shield into pieces. At the same time, Wuther also attacked. The strongest paladin in history raised his hand and cast Divine Sanction. This broke through Kel Thuzad's magic defense and directly hit his evil soul. The world spun around him. Kel Thuzad didn't even have time to summon his evil creatures before he was struck in the face by Wuxia the Fierce. Like a high-flying ball in a baseball, Kel Thuzad's body flew up under the bombardment of the divine hammer. Unfortunately, he didn't fly very far. His body only rose about a meter high before he was bounced back by an ice wall behind him. Oomph! That was Antonida's attack. He was caught off guard and was completely caught off guard. In addition, Antonida's strength was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his strength was far above his. In the future, the Great Frost Lich, one of the strongest fighters under the Lich King Kel Thuzad, was now like a little girl being molested by a few strong men. He had no strength to fight back. He was stepped on by Wuxia, his hammer pressed against his head, and his body was continuously sealed by Krasis and Kale. At this moment, Kel Thuzad was no different from the most useless skeleton soldier. He also knew that he was definitely finished, so he let go of everything. Why? How did you know, Duke Marcus, that I gave up my life to pursue eternity? I only transformed myself into a lich last week. Even that female demon didn't know that I did it. She thought that I was just a degenerate with a soul. What? Tell me. Why? Duque gently pointed at his own eyes. Just like how I saw through Sargera's possession of Mediv, I also saw through you. I have a pair of eyes that can see through the souls of degenerates who have been corrupted by demons. When the dust settled, Antonidas also walked forward. Kel Thuzad, I've always thought highly of your talent. If not, I wouldn't have agreed to let you become one of the Kirin Tor counselors. I warned you, Kel Thuzad. Don't carry out those forbidden necromancy spells. How did you do it? On the surface you promised me, but behind my back, you were still secretly carrying out your necromancy experiments. When Duque told me, the first thing I thought of was you. But, until the moment the truth was revealed, I only believed it. Antonida's shoulders rose and fell rapidly. He turned his head, and there was an unconcealable sadness in his eyes. He looked at Fail, Wuxia, and Duque. I'm sorry that such a thing actually happened in the Dalajan Kirin Tor counselors. I'm deeply sorry. For the sake of the Dalajan's reputation, please keep this a secret. Kel Thuzad, we will deal with it, and we will definitely give everyone a satisfactory answer. Now it's time for the Kirin Tor counselors. Chapter 294. Kel Thuzad, a malignant tumor lurking in the human camp. Duque had long wanted to deal with him, but he didn't have any evidence. He was one of the 6 counselors of Kirin Tor. Just this identity alone was enough to make him immune to death. To be at Kel Thuzad's level, he was like Anduin or Bolvar in Stormwind. If he were to be killed casually, it would be strange if the Dalajan did not explode. If the Dalajan went berserk, the Alliance could forget about having a team of mages. With reason and evidence, they had to dig a big hole to bury such a powerful person in advance. Actually, when he saw the Dead Speaker's soul diary, Duque didn't react on the spot. I'm very lucky. I've finally found a fallen with great power and potential among the advanced mages of Dalaran. He is extremely obsessed with psychics, and has no resistance to my lord's power. In the future, there were too many liches or fallen who were skilled in the art of necromancy and had a name. Ras Frostwhisper, Dean of Psychics, and this Dead Speaker in front of him. However, these guys all had one thing in common, and that was they were all followers of the Cursing Sect. Speaking of the Cursing Sect, one had to mention one existence, Kel Thuzad. As a veteran player who had led teams to defeat countless times in the game, and finally conquered Kel Thuzad's nest, Naxxramas, Duque definitely knew that the boss of the Cursing Sect was Kel Thuzad. In history, it wasn't until the end of the Second Beastman War that Kel Thuzad's conflict with his colleagues continued to expand due to their obsession with necromancy. After hearing the Lich King's summons, he sold all his assets and ran to the polar continent's Northrend to lick the Lich King's boots, becoming a powerful lich that made everyone tremble in fear. At that time he founded the Cursing Sect. However, the plots of demons were long-term and sinister. As the leader of the Burning Legion, Sargeras could secretly sneak in and hide in Egwin's stomach for more than 300 years. Duque didn't believe that the Cursing Sect didn't have any predecessors, and that there weren't any people who had been hiding for a long time. Needless to ask, there must be. Otherwise, how could the Lich King's arrival in the world of Azeroth be so terrifying? Without so many liches and death knights, how could Arthas control so many brainless ghouls and skeletons? So after seeing Lady Deadspeaker's memories, Duque tried to visit a group of Kirin Tor counselors. Of course, his target was only Kel Thuzad. Just like the system notification, Sargeras had possessed Medivh. This time, Duque could clearly see the label of this President Ku in the system's vision, Lich. Duque had a hard time holding it in. He almost burst out laughing on the spot. At that time he was accompanied by the Azure Dragon on the left and the White Tiger on the right. Yes, the two holy knights, Gavin Rad and Windsor. Even if Manager Ku were to fly into a rage on the spot, Duque was not afraid at all. If President Ku wanted to run, Duque wouldn't be able to stop him either. Of course, President Ku wouldn't fly into a rage. It would be ideal for Old Man Antonidas to deal with him. As for Kel Thuzad, who hadn't been summoned by the Lich King, he seemed to be his obedient pet. In the end he was a lich, but he pretended to be a human. Naturally he would be struck by lightning. After a whole day, Antonidas called Duque into his office. Kel Thuzad has been purified. It was supervised by Knight Uther and carried out by Archbishop Fail. After Antonidas finished, Duque nodded. This kind of thing couldn't be deceived. He could ask Uther or Alonso's later. The only problem is that, in the books and legends, liches have phylacteries. We didn't find Kel Thuzad's phylactery. But that's not important. Because of our arrangements he lost at least 90% of his soul. A lich with such a heavy loss of soul, even if he were to be resurrected in the future, he wouldn't amount to much. At most, he would be trash at the level of a sky mage. Hearing this, Duque finally let out a sigh of relief. That was Chief Ku. He was despicable, shameless and lowly. He did all sorts of dirty things. If he was still the original Chief Ku, Duque would really have to worry about the people around him. Since Chief Ku was destined to become trash, Duque didn't mind teaching him how to be a human. Antonidas pinched his white eyebrows. Alright, the principle of a mage is equivalent exchange. Even though I don't like your style, you have made outstanding contributions to the Dalajan. The Dalajan will not mistreat you. How could I accept that? Duque said hypocritically. Alright, thank you, Deputy Commander Duke Marcus. Thank you for your outstanding contributions to the Alliance. You can go now. Even though he knew that Antonidas was joking, Duque still released a fierce gaze that was comparable to death gaze. How dare you? That was what Duque's gaze said. Why don't you come to Kirin Tor and be one of the 6 counselors? There's an empty spot. Duque rolled his eyes. I'm not going to your place to suffer. Antonidas was amused. He had an expression that said, little guy, I've seen through you. Alright, I also guess that you want my arcane circuit model. Duque corrected him. To be precise, I want an enhanced arcane circuit that can support Crown of Ice, and another fire magic circuit of the same level. As soon as Duque finished speaking, Antonidas' eyelids twitched. You have a big appetite. If it wasn't for the fact that Antonidas thought that he owed Duque a huge favor, he would have flipped the table on the spot. He wouldn't have known that Kel Thuzad had never thought of directly causing trouble in the Dalajan. In the end, the Kirin Tor speaker pinched his nose and admitted it. Alright, it's the Phoenix Flame of the Sunstrider family, right? I've also done some research on their circuits. It's not impossible for me to give you the arcane circuit that I've researched. First, I have to tell you that this is an unverified magic circuit model. I'm not responsible for what happens in the future. Duque nodded. Alright. Secondly, from Morningstar onwards, every time the Crown of Ice circuit is upgraded, you need a special sacrifice to strengthen your circuit. This is something that cannot be obtained through training. I used the soul of a Yeti King to upgrade to Radiant Moon, and to upgrade to Sunrise I used the soul of a Blue Dragon King. At this point, Antonidas returned the death gaze. Yes, it was the kind of death gaze that would kill you if you dared to say it out loud. Chapter 295. After all, the Blue Dragons were on the verge of extinction, and if the Blue Dragon King found out, Antonidas would definitely be in huge trouble. Duque nodded seriously before he continued. It's not impossible for you to fuse Phoenix Flames and Crown of Ice, these 2 top-level circuits, but it means that you're taking a path that's 100 times more difficult than mine. Not only do you need the 4 types of souls, ice and fire, but you also need to strengthen your arcane circuit, which means that you need 6 rare souls to ascend to Breaking Dawn. Duque curled his lips and didn't say anything. He was still holding the tip of an artifact magic staff, Atish, the legendary staff of the Guardian, in his hand. If he was still that black in this life, he would have to collect 41 fragments of the artifact magic staff. Compared to this kind of unreliable collection, elemental souls with a clear direction and even substitutes were nothing. Of course, Duque was still a little envious of Medivh. Medivh, who became a demigod mage and triple virtue pharaoh almost effortlessly, clearly had a good mother. Who was Egwin? The former world guardian, the awesome person who fought alongside the four-colored dragons and abused demons all day long. Antonidas had to tremble in fear when dealing with a blue dragon king, but if it was Egwin, a big shot would speak up with just one word. The blue dragon king would probably sacrifice his soul even if he committed suicide. Speaking of which, whether he liked it or not was another matter. Seeing Duque's unmoved appearance, Antonidas even had the illusion that he was old. These were two different things. This time, Duke had helped him clean up his own faction and saved Dalaran from losing a huge amount of reputation. He still had to repay this favor. Antonidas continued, "Perhaps your path is the broadest. Since you've chosen, I won't say anything. However, the magic circuit I pass on to you is still easy for outsiders to see. You have to pretend." Duque understood on the spot. I'll deliver 10,000 top-level magic books to the Dalaran." Antonidas rolled his eyes. What the F***ck? Top class? It was obvious that he was using those inferior magic books to fool people again. The old speaker was a little angry. "Don't go too far." "Alright, 100 Morning Star books and 10 Radiant Moon books," Duque added. "Announce to the public that there are 1,000 Morning Star and 100 Radiant Moon magic tomes among the 10,000. Just like that, the old fox and the young fox reached an agreement. "Okay, I'll give you this arcane light magic circuit model." When Antonidas transmitted the magic model to Duque, Duque wasn't surprised by the magic model's wonders. "Congratulations, host. Antonidas is willing to give you the top-notch arcane magic circuit, Arcane Throne, with a completion rate of 82%. Recalling that his other circuit was called the Crown of Ice, Duque suddenly felt a headache coming on. He finally understood why Antonidas was so stubborn in his old age. It turned out that this guy thought of himself as the king of the magical realm. Alright, in any case, it was the Dalaran that he was screwing over. Duque decided to make a fortune in silence. The greatest king system was not good at creating something out of nothing, but it was perfect at correcting errors. In the state guesthouse in Dalaran, with the basic model as a comparison, Duke only spent one night to obtain a perfect version of the circuit of Arcane Throne, after thousands of simulations by the system. Duque decided to advance in the Dalaran. Duque had already completed the most crucial energy absorption in Karazhan. Now he only needed to make minor adjustments which did not matter much in the Dalaran. A complete version of a top-notch product was indeed different. The moment Duque embedded the Arcane Throne, which was 2 sizes larger, into Phoenix Flames and Crown of Ice, the combination of 1 big and 2 small circuits immediately gave Duque a different kind of spiritual impact. There was a brief buzzing in his ears, and his vision blurred for a moment. However, Duque was certain that he had indeed felt the existence of the laws of heaven and earth at this moment. Even he did not realize what had happened. The moment he embedded the Arcane Throne, an incomparably profound and complex magic operation knowledge came back from the 3 circuits. In that instant he seemed to understand the meaning of Morning Star, but this happened in less than 1,000th of a second. It was as if in that instant he had lost his identity as a human. He was no longer a human. Instead, he was a sun that emitted blazing light, a real shining star. The magic energy that escaped from Duque's body instantly rushed out of Duque's body like a hurricane from a jet engine, easily sweeping everything in the room. It burst the window and flew through the door, scaring Gavin, Rad and Windsor, who were guarding the door. They took advantage of the gap in the arcane storm to poke their heads into the room. Duque raised his head and met their gazes. They were surprised to find that Duque's eyes were no longer deep black. In those small black eyes, countless mysterious magic arrays were reflected. These arrays were constantly changing and combining, as if they were corresponding to the formal integration of the 3 magic circuits in his body. Duke's vision had completely changed. He no longer saw the decorations in the room, and he no longer saw his 2 powerful paladin bodyguards. He no longer saw the earth and the sky, and he no longer saw anything that was material. Instead, it was a world full of energy. There was no substance, only energy. It represented the Violet Fortress with a high concentration of energy. It represented the higher energy level of Antonida's laboratory. There was also the Dalaran sky, which was slightly thinner in energy compared to them. The boundless sky, the vast land, everything paled in comparison to the bright star that was Duque. Duque gently closed his eyes. Every breath he took caused his body to undergo a miraculous change. The hot air that surged into his lungs was instantly absorbed by the small alveoli in his lungs. All the oxygen entered his blood vessels and was quickly transported to the magic circuit that existed in his body in the form of the second dimension. It became nourishment, stimulating the magic in the circuit to rapidly fission. It provided all the magic that Duque needed to cast spells. Duque suddenly laughed bitterly. No wonder Sky Magi and Morningstar Magi were a very, very important dividing line in the world of Magi. This was in no way inferior to the advancement of ordinary Magi. Previously, Earth and Sky Magi were said to have transported energy from the outside world to meet the needs of casting spells. Then above Morningstar, it was a classic mix of magic. It could be absorbed from the outside world or created by oneself. From a transmigrator's point of view, before Morningstar, it was a conventional aircraft carrier that needed a lot of fuel to operate. After Morningstar, it would be upgraded to a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Even though many things were needed, there was no need to worry about energy. Chapter 296. In a sense, Duque was now carrying a nuclear reactor for human use. No matter what, Duque had taken a very important step in the field of magic. The moment Duque advanced, the entire Dalagen was in an uproar. Who's advancing? This mana is ridiculous. Which Morningstar Master has finally stepped onto the path of Radiant Moon? The cries of the acolytes and low-ranked wizards were unreliable. The high-ranked wizards did not look too good. Many high-ranked wizards had experienced the process of transforming ordinary elemental power into pure Morningstar mana. This was definitely the first time the amount of mana was so ridiculous. Comparable to Grandmaster Antonidas? No. It's even more ridiculous than the chairman. Perhaps only the legendary protector, Medivh, would have such a terrifying momentum when he advanced. Yes, back then I was studying in the Elven Forest, and I actually felt an explosion of mana from Karazhan that was more than 100 kilometers away. That momentum was similar to this person right now. My god, this is at least the mana of 100 ordinary Morningstar wizards, right? Who is it? Feeling the arcane energy storm that was spilling out of his body gradually stop and the surging mana circulating normally in his body, Duque really wanted to laugh wildly for a minute. The system notifications kept appearing. As you have obtained the top-notch arcane magic circuit, Arcane Throne, you have obtained all strengthened arcane metamagic specialties by default. You have obtained the metamagic specialization, Arcane Concentration. The chances of enemies resisting your arcane magic are reduced by 30%. You have obtained the metamagic specialization, Arcane Focus. When you cast any spell, there is a 33% chance that you will enter a spell-saving state. In this state, the mana consumption of your next damaging spell will be reduced by 100%. You have obtained the top-notch metamagic specialization, Arcane Energy Storm. After activation, your spell damage will be increased by 100% and your mana consumption will be increased by 50%. Lasts for 30 seconds. After each use, you have to wait for 5 minutes for your arcane magic circuit to calm down, or else there is a possibility of the circuit collapsing. As you have obtained the top-level Frost Magic Circuit, Crown of Ice, you have obtained all enhanced Frost metamagic abilities by default. You have obtained the metamagic ability, Rapid Cooldown. You have obtained the metamagic ability, Ice Barrier. Of course, there was also the Fire metamagic ability that Phoenix Flames gave him. The metamagic specialties of all three schools almost dazzled Duque. Now that Medivh had passed away and Khadgar had become a ghost, Duque could say without any exaggeration that he was the only high-ranked triple cultivator pharaoh in the world. With a thought, 3 magic orbs of each element appeared behind Duque. There were 3 magic orbs of each element. A crimson ball of fire, a pure white ball of ice and a purplish-blue ball of arcane magic. All 3 types of balls were moving in a triangular pattern on Duque's back. There were exactly 9 balls occupying a 360-degree position around Duque, and each ball was 40 degrees. Outside the state guesthouse, all 5 members of the Kirin Tor Council had arrived, including Archbishop Fail and Uther. Everyone applauded in unison. Congratulations, Duque. Antonidas' smile was a little forced. You really are a genius. Krasis congratulated him sincerely. Congratulations, but, Duque, are you really not targeting me? Kale, that's, smile was a little strange because there were 3 yellow-green arcane flames circling above his head. This was already Kale, that's trademark. Now that Kale, that's had 3 and Duque had 9, it was a little embarrassing no matter how one looked at it. No, Kale, that's, you should be my master in this aspect. I found that you can better train your ability to manipulate the elements by doing this. So please don't be offended, I couldn't help but learn it. In the future I'll tell everyone I meet that I learned from you, okay? Duque very sincerely used the special skill, hypocrisy, to cover up his actions that were purely pretentious. All of a sudden even Kale, was moved. No, I'm too ashamed to say that. Speaking of which, I'm a little biased. Kale, frowned, and in the next moment, 3 arcane energy balls appeared behind him. However, these 3 energy balls looked weaker than his fire elemental balls. Duque blinked. Kale, seemed a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, it seems that I've neglected the cultivation of the arcane. The training of the arcane circuit can indeed make my flame circuit stronger. You've woken me up. At this moment Jaina arrived. Congratulations, Brother Duque. Jaina's words were very sweet. Thank you. Duque smiled slightly. No matter where one was, a beautiful woman was always a beautiful scenery. This time, the moment she saw the 9 energy balls behind Duque, Jaina could no longer look away. Because she saw an existence that broke her common sense and saw an even more powerful possibility. For some reason, looking at Duque, who had successfully cultivated 3 paths of cultivation, she felt her heart palpitate. It was not that she had fallen in love with Duque, but that she had fallen in love with the power of the 3 paths of cultivation. However, Jaina kept this desire in the bottom of her heart, because she knew very well that it was not easy to obtain the magic circuit model of these 3 paths of cultivation. Getting the details of the fine-tuning circuit was a secret of all mages. Originally, in her imagination, Antonidas was already the strongest in her heart, and the only ultimate existence that was qualified for her to become his disciple. Now, her thoughts were a little shaken. Antonidas walked over and patted Duque's shoulder. In any case, congratulations, Duque. You can now proudly hold the title of Master. However, because of your advancement, you neglected the mages you took with you. If they come to apply for contract arbitration, I won't help you. What he meant was, kid, have you reaped enough benefits? If you've reaped enough benefits, get lost. Don't be an eyesore here. Duque smiled bitterly. He quickly bid farewell to the Dalajan people and rushed back to South Shore. Duque was busy with his advancement and had not been seen for 2 whole months. Not only that, but because Duque was not around, everyone could not open the teleportation portal to Karazhan. This caused the mages who came because of his reputation to complain a lot. The bitter Alicia had no choice but to comfort everyone as Duque's assistant, promising that when Duque returned, all sorts of benefits and lessons would be made up for. If Duque did not have the title of Deputy Commander of the Alliance, there would have been many mages who would have complained to Antonidas that Duque had not fulfilled his end of the contract, and would apply to cancel it. All the grumbles disappeared without a trace as Duque appeared in front of everyone with the halo of a Morning Star Wizard and 9 energy balls hovering behind him. Chapter 297. What kind of joke was this? A 16-year-old Morning Star Wizard? Just the abundant and terrifying undulations alone were enough to kill most Morning Star Wizards in an instant. Duque was only a first-rank Morning Star Wizard. That was not to mention that Duque was a super pharaoh who specialized in fire, ice, and arcane magic. Only an idiot would not cling to such an exaggerated golden thigh. The few fellows who had been the most rowdy ran to Alicia, begging for the forgiveness of the noble lady of the Bara family. As long as she did not tell on them, everything would be fine. No matter how good-tempered Alicia was, she was not a pushover. She bore the resentful gazes of those fellows and truthfully told Duque everything that had happened in the past 2 months. Duque used his Mediva's moral integrity to activate hypocrisy, and said, "Oh, it's all right. This is human nature. It's my fault. My mistake has delayed everyone's studies. I will try my best to make it up to everyone. If everyone feels that it is unreasonable, I am willing to cancel the contract. Don't worry, there will be sufficient compensation." Of course, it was a different matter in his heart. You dare look down on me for causing trouble? Don't leave if you dare. I promise to send you to the safest place on the battlefield. Those fellows were just saying it with their mouths. They did not leave before and they would not leave now. If they had no confidence in Duque, they would not have chosen to come. Those who came were poor acolytes or beginner wizards who did not have enough funds. As the saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. As long as the towering tree that was Duque did not fall, no one would be able to cause any trouble. Moreover, Duque had not fallen, but had become even more imposing and exaggerated. After Duque gave a few lectures and privately guided a few official wizards, all their resentment disappeared. With the arrival of spring, the Great War was about to begin. The orcs who had been dormant for an entire winter did not weaken their fighting spirit. On the contrary, their fighting spirit was even more vigorous. Glory and land were what the tribes desired. The orcs were never satisfied with these two things. After receiving reports from the spies and the dwarves from Ironforge, the entire alliance went into a state of alert. That was because the beastmen who were migrating south during the winter were gradually moving towards the wetlands. The orc laborers who had not left during the winter had begun to build ships again. In the capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom, Lothar presided over the first high-level meeting of the Alliance of Darkness in 2 years. The number of participants was very high, and the kings of the various kingdoms were all present. Taking advantage of the fact that the orc ships had not sealed off the sea, the dwarf prince Magni Bronzebeard once again came to the Rotterdam Kingdom. Thanks to the reduced activity of the beastmen during the winter, Duque used his own fleet to transport many batches of supplies to the Iron Furnace Castle. The bronze-bearded dwarves of Iron Furnace Castle had a much better life. The dwarves' underground warfare wasn't something that the other tall races could handle, so there was no point in sending reinforcements. Duque's act of tightening his belt and providing medicine and food warmed the dwarves' hearts even more. So when he came to Magni Lordaeron and saw Duque, he used the most direct way to express his enthusiasm. He used his dwarven strength to bend Duque's waist and gave Duque a bear hug. "Ugh, Magni, that's enough. I can't breathe." Duque rolled his eyes, almost foaming at the mouth. "Ah, thank you, Duque. You really are the dwarves' best friend. I can't wait for the day you lead the army to counterattack the orcs. If we're lucky, we can counterattack this year. But this depends on whether the heavens are looking out for us," Duque consoled. Magni automatically filtered out the rest. "All right, I'll tell them to hold on for another half a year." "What the hell I said is," Magni blinked and showed a cunning side. "My people are in the most difficult situation. They need hope. If that doesn't work, you can send a few thousand soldiers to Iron Furnace Castle next winter. They'll still be there." "What the F***ck this works? You're really a dwarf. Are you sure you're not a goblin in dwarf skin?" Duque wanted to roll his eyes this time. In return for the Alliance's support for Iron Furnace Castle, Magni and Duque's fleet brought a large batch of long warhammers and axes forged by the dwarves in winter. There was no choice. Dwarves just didn't like to use swords. Rather than having dwarven craftsmen forge long swords, it was better to make what they were best at. Dwarven two-handed warhammers and axes were one-handed versions for humans anyway. If they were made longer and slightly balanced, they would be the best weapons in the human world. That was a total of 30,000 dwarven weapons. All the kings were jealous of the dwarves' man-made weapons, but Magni was stubborn and didn't buy it. The food and medicine were split evenly between Duque, so he only gave it to Duque. Duque had the final say on how it was divided. Duque was also very generous. He would not take it all for himself. After wrangling with the other kings, regardless of the country's strength, the principle was that whoever contributed the most troops, money and manpower would get the biggest share. Naturally, King Tyrrhenus received the biggest piece of cake. Magrani and General Abendis's Blood Cross Army's elite team had all changed their equipment, and everyone else was envious of them. After the rare benefit, the military conference hall became like a market again because of the orcs' movements. We must also build a line of defense on the South Stream coast. We want your cement, a lot of it." King Xian roared. After the defense line at Hillsbrad Hills was built like an iron bucket by Duque, the most excited person was King Xian of Gilness. In theory, if the Horde didn't attack South Shore, the closest place to land was the South Stream coast on the southwest side of the northern continent, which was in front of Gilness. He emphasized this more than 10 times in an hour. In the harsh winter, it was impossible for the craftsmen to work when the sky was full of snow. After spring, to build a line of defense in the shortest time possible, cement was a must. "Don't worry, Xian. If a horde without warships dares to go that far to Gilness, Kurtira's fleet will bleed them dry," King Delin comforted him. "For the sake of the holy light, can't you be a little nervous? If those crazy green-skinned creatures can make two-headed ogres and move undead knights, why can't they make warships or flying demon legions?" Xian was too excited. His thick red neck looked like 2 dicks had been inserted into it. Chapter 298. Lothar couldn't help but roll his eyes as he watched the kings turn the splendid meeting hall into a noisy market. No one could maintain their gentlemanly demeanor in the face of such a major event. Lothar had to appease Xian. "Don't worry, the horde can't fly. Even if they can, it's impossible for hundreds of thousands of them to fly over and land in your capital. If that's the case, we'll all cut our throats with our swords. When Lothar said this, Duque frowned. He suddenly realized a serious problem that he had neglected for a long time. The Alliance did not have a decent air force at all. This was not a simple problem. Duque knew very well where the Griffins were. They were at the Eagle's Nest Mountain in the hinterlands. The problem was that it belonged to the Wildhammer dwarves, who were absolutely neutral. In his previous life without the Horde, the dwarves who were harder than stones didn't even care about their compatriots, the Bronzebeard dwarves, let alone the humans. This was also the result of the Battle of the Three Hammers, between the Bronzebeard, Wildhammer and Ebon dwarves in the Iron Furnace Castle. Thinking of this, Duque's temples twitched painfully. There was no substantial progress in the military meeting. The biggest resolution was to strengthen the Shadowfang Castle on the east side of the South Stream coast. This fortress belonged to Master Gilnis Erigel, and was a very good defensive core. As for the plan to strengthen the entire North and South Stream coast, it was stalled due to a lack of cement and funds. King Xion almost hated Duque for this, muttering that Duque had used up all the cement in order to strengthen the defense line in the Hillsbrad Hills. Lothar patted Duque's shoulder and said, "Don't mind him." Duque could only smile bitterly. Perhaps this was the sorrow of the weak. It was not Duque himself but the current alliance. Even though Duque had killed more than 200,000 Horde soldiers twice, the Horde was still the stronger side in terms of military strength, both in terms of quantity and quality. Perhaps the gap in quality was narrowing, but the disadvantage in quantity would take at least 2 more wars to close. Until then, the alliance would be the passive side. This was a situation that was almost paradoxical. If he wanted more forces to join the alliance, he would have to let the Horde tribes into the northern continent. If they did that, they would waste the current defensive line. If they maintained the front lines and allowed the Horde to rest and recuperate in the southern continent, the Iron Furnace fort would fall one day. When that time came, the North and South would face off, and it would be a 100-year war. Duque had a headache. After the inconclusive military meeting, Duque returned to South Shore. Then he found 4 long white legs hanging down from the roof of his house. It wasn't the first time Duque had seen long legs hanging down from that position, but why were there 4? Could it be that if he planted a pair of legs in winter he would be able to harvest 2 pairs in spring? Poo. What kind of damn setting was this? Whoosh. Storm warning. Storm warning. In 10 seconds, there will be an updraft and a lot of clothes may be blown away. Duque pinched his nose and imitated the clumsiest mechanical voice. Illyria, on the other hand, was the most thin-skinned of them all. She did a beautiful pigeon flip and jumped down. Queen Sylvie, on the other hand, giggled and swung her white legs without a care in the world. Hee sis, don't believe him. If he really dares to do that, we'll just shoot down all his magic energy balls like apples. Duque rubbed his forehead. The competitive Queen Sylvie might really do that. Alright, I think I know why the boring Windrunner ladies are here. Duque withdrew his gaze. We've been moldy here for an entire winter for the Alliance. Aurelia put her hands on her waist and said confidently. Duque waved his hand and immediately used Magician's hand to bring a stack of letters of complaint. Yes. Before the winter festival, the goat that George's family used to celebrate disappeared. Later, it was found in the Windrunner's camp. The 2 legs on her head forgot to swing. My Naga told me that a nimble thief stole a dozen of my merfolk's golden pearls. A gust of wind blew. Why is the spring wind still a little cold? 2 barrels of dwarven gold wine that King Lang used to celebrate the new year and sent by Bronzebeard King of Ironforge mysteriously disappeared. Aurelia looked at the back of a certain future queen who was turning around and trying to escape. At this moment, a gust of wind blew on Duque's roof, and the 2 sisters disappeared. Servanas, the angry voice of a big sister came from the wind. Duque scratched his head. As expected of a Windrunner. She can go wherever she wants. Of course, Duque didn't really want to settle the score with Servanas. He just wanted to tease her a little. Of course, after the incident with Kuel Salis, Aurelia, who had always been noble in front of others as a high elf, obviously couldn't tolerate her sister's behavior. A few minutes later, Aurelia brought back the pitiful Queen Sylvanas. With her ears pulled and tears hanging from the corners of her eyes, Sylvanas bowed with her head lowered was unexpectedly cute. Duke almost wanted to go over and kiss Queen Sheila. Well, Duque, I'll compensate for the loss on behalf of my sister. For a moment, Duque really wanted to ask Sylvanas to sell herself. That was Servanas they were talking about. The unbelievably powerful Sylvanas. Even if she didn't become a Dark Ranger, she was still unbelievably powerful. But that was impossible. First of all, it couldn't pass Duque's own heart. Secondly, the Windrunner family was actually quite rich. No, it's just a few 100,000 gold coins. I don't care. One experiment is gone. Ah, that's my good Duque. No wonder I loved you so much. Aurelia patted Duque's shoulder and spoke like an elder. But Duque knew that Aurelia was actually feeling guilty. Stealing tributes was definitely a big or small matter. Of course, Duque knew very well that in front of a great enemy, no human kingdom would fight with the pharaoh Cule Salis over such a thing. Sylvana stuck out her tongue where Aurelia couldn't see. However, the Windrunner's perception of the outside world didn't just rely on his eyesight. The Demon King's hand that was pulling Sylvana's ear tightened. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Sister, I was wrong. This time, Sylvanas was really terrified. I also know that you've been idle for so long, you need some excitement. We're always ready to fight for the righteous cause of the Alliance. Aurelia was serious, puffing out her chest and sucking in her stomach. Fight my ass. You're an idiot, okay? Now there's a mission that may or may not be dangerous. Me. The two sisters raised their hands together. Chapter 299. Magic was a magical thing. It had an extremely unscientific side, but it also had a fixed pattern that showed its supernatural side. When Duque combined the three elements of fire, frost, and arcane magic into an energy ball, Lothar looked at Duque as if he was looking at a walking bomb. After being repeatedly hit by Lang's King's contempt, Duque gave up on healing. It was March, a day of spring. It was also the 3-month anniversary of Duque losing his little maid. It was because Duque had left Vanessa in South Shore after going to Karazhan. Then Vanessa, who felt that she could not be of much help, went to train in a sacred place for thieves. Yes, it was the Ravenholt Manor in the northeast of the Hillsbrad Hills. Although the little maid left a note saying that she was training somewhere in the area, Duque immediately thought of that place. Logically speaking, recruiting a team of spies was also quite useful. Unfortunately, it was really useless in the following period of time. Since Duque was busy, he did not bother about it for the time being. In March, the Horde would make a big move. Van Cleve and Stroman, who had spent the entire autumn and winter in the western wilderness, sent a letter asking when they would take action. Duque's instructions were, wait for the main force of the Horde to leave the southern continent first. The main force of the Horde could not stay in the southern continent for long. If it were a human king, he might be satisfied with occupying such a vast piece of land, but unfortunately, it was the Horde, and the aggressiveness of the orcs would not let them stay put. After the midwinter ended, the troops that fought in South Shore last year gathered in South Shore again. However, Lothar flew into a rage and rushed to Rotterdam to vent his anger on King Tyrrhenas again. The reason was simple. At such a time, Rotterdam, Dalagen, and Alterac actually refused to enter a state of total war. What do you mean by this? Do you really think that you can destroy millions of orcs with just these few people? Even if we ignore the laborers who do not have much combat power, and even if the elites of the Horde are decreasing, the total number of troops of the Horde is still close to 500,000. Lothar slammed the table hard. Facing Lothar's anger, Menethil too was also helpless. I've already sent out my warning. Most of my lords, however, chose to use money to fulfill their obligations. So, if you want money I can, but if you want soldiers I can't give you more. Sorry, Commander Lothar. This was the weirdness of the feudal knight system. The people were the private property of the lord, and the lord listened to the king. However, the king had no right to directly conscript the lord's people without a proper reason. The tradition left behind by the Arathar Empire was that, unless it was a formal invasion with the goal of occupying land, or if one's own territory was under attack, each lord had the right to choose to respond to the king's summons with money and resources. If Tyrrhenas used too many soldiers from his territories, it would cause a chain reaction where the ruler was weak and his subordinates were strong. Lothar was so angry that he turned to Antonidas. The Dalagen's president also had a bitter expression on his face. Something has happened to the Dalagen. A bunch of blind, neutral mages who don't understand the general trend of the world are protesting against the Dalagen's excessive involvement in the war. They think that as long as the Dalagen is fine they can stay out of it. Then, while one of our counselors is in trouble, they directly held a protest and asked for a new election and a series of reforms. Lothar was so angry that he almost pulled out his hair. Finally he looked at King Eden of Alterac. Alterac is a small country. Conscripting one more infantry is already the limit. If we continue to conscript, we won't even need the orcs to attack. Half of our people will starve to death in winter. Yes, that's why a certain deputy commander bought food from our Bara family. At this moment, Lothar even wanted to kill Eden. Using the excuse that the country was weak and that the food had been given to the Stormwind citizens, he directly shirked his responsibility. In the end, these three families saw that Stormguard was at the Sodder Bridge on the eastern front. The Stormwind refugees were defending South Shore on the central front, and Kurtira's navy was protecting the western front. This group of short-sighted nobles and mages thought that if someone were to die, it would be the foreigners who died. It was none of their business. At this moment, the evil side of human nature was completely exposed. Lothar was almost out of his mind. His roar almost echoed throughout the entire Lordaeron palace. Tell those damned nobles and idiot mages who think they are very safe. Now the Horde's military strength is 3 times that of the Alliance. The Orcs' individual combat ability is also 3 times that of humans. Once our coastal defense is broken, then every human will pay the price in blood for your refusal to enter a state of total war. Money. 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 What's the use of money? You're talking about money when you've lost your head. Eden muttered, if the defense line is broken, then someone must have not done their best. King Del-Lin spat on the ground. Bah, since Stormwind was besieged last year, the entire shipyard of Kurtira's has been building ships in 3 shifts 24 hours a day. I've used up every gold in the treasury to build more shipyards and train every fisherman of Kurtira's into sailors. Now I can't wait for the orcs to take 100 goblin airships and descend into your Alterac palace, holding a human barbecue party in your palace courtyard. With that, Del-Lin kicked open the meeting hall's door and left without looking back, leaving Eden roaring in exasperation with a face as red as a pig's liver. On this day, the kings of Stormwind and the other 3 countries, who had already entered a state of total war, parted on bad terms with the leaders of the 3 countries who were only willing to enter a state of partial war. If not for the incident on the 15th of March, this might have been a precursor to the split of the alliance. On this day, the 3rd fleet of Kurtira's patrolled the waters opposite the Paladin Gulf. The lookout suddenly saw something unusual. On the horizon, countless blood-red sails suddenly appeared. The lookout sounded the alarm. Dang dang dang. The shrill alarm alarmed the entire fleet. What the hell? Why are the Bloodsail pirates here? The commander of the 3rd fleet, Major General Akent, cursed angrily. However, something else he saw through the telescope made him shudder. Ships. More than a dozen huge warships. They were definitely battleship-class ships, but they had a completely different shape from human ships. Apart from the sails, the entire ship had no sense of beauty. It was like a pile of garbage floating on the sea, piled up by countless messy wooden products. However, the cannons on the warships clearly told the Major General that they were all F***King warships. And they were Orc warships. Commander, please give your orders. The first mate shouted anxiously. The other ships also sent flags of inquiry. Who has the navy of Kurtira's ever been afraid of on the sea? Raise the battle flag. A day later, the entire alliance learned of the destruction of the 3rd fleet of Kurtira's. All the countries were shocked. Chapter 300. In the headquarters of South Shore. General Dalin's face was livid. He had spent the entire autumn and winter to replenish the 3rd fleet, which had suffered heavy losses in the last battle. Because of this, the 4th fleet, which should have been completed long ago, only had 80% of the ships of the official fleet. But now the entire 3rd fleet had been destroyed in a single day. Out of over 100 warships of various sizes, only 8 had managed to escape back to South Shore. Most of the others had sunk, and about a dozen small and medium-sized warships had been captured. The only good news was that the 3rd fleet had also dealt a heavy blow to the enemy. According to the report, the Bloodsail fleet had sunk about 50 ships. This result was not enough to comfort the people. It was very simple. The damned Bloodsail pirates had betrayed the humans and joined the orcs, which had tipped the scales of victory. Humans were no longer the overlords of the sea. Goddamn Fairville. Dalin smashed a solid wooden table into pieces with a punch. Duque, Andoin, and Lang were all silent. Duque felt a little guilty. Back then it was a certain someone who provoked the Bloodsail pirates. Duke killed him and captured him, which was how the Stormwind Kingdom's fleet came to be. Duque cursed in his heart. I should have gotten rid of them. Duque was just wishful thinking. The world of Azeroth was too big. If he wanted to deal with the Bloodsail pirates, Duque, who did not know the coordinates, had no place to teleport. Teleport to Stormwind City, which was occupied by the orcs. That would be too much. Even if he rode a griffin, Duque had to spend more than a week crossing the entire continent to Stranglethorn Vale, which was the southernmost part of the continent. Then he had to rely on his unreliable memory in the game to find the Bloodsail pirate's nest. Then, without any help, he had to subdue the remaining 3 fleets of the Bloodsail pirates and make them abandon their nest and head north? Just thinking about it made Duque's head hurt. But now the Bloodsail pirates had come themselves. If it was just them, Duque would not even have a breather. The problem was that they were mixed up with the tribe. That would be troublesome. Noxus asked, "How many fleets do the Bloodsail pirates have?" 3, but their combined strength is roughly equal to 2 of Kull Tira's fleets, Duque muttered. "No, I know Fairville. That guy never puts all the stakes on anything. Therefore he would only bring 2 fleets at most. The problem is the tribe's new battleship." Dai Lin recovered from his anger. Turayan murmured, "Even if our navy can still suppress the Horde's fleet, but..." Lothar's face was pale. "But we won't be able to stop the transport ships." That was the main point. The Horde did not need to have complete control over the sea. All they needed to do was cross the damn sea and they would be able to display their unparalleled land superiority. Lang asked, "Will the tribe attack South Shore again?" This was not nervousness. On the contrary, it was a kind of hope. Now that Duque was running South Shore like an iron bucket, he couldn't wait for the tribe to be so stupid as to kill themselves. Duque shook his head. "I dare say, unless the tribe replaces the dead Black Hand as their chief. If it was Orgrim, he wouldn't do something so brainless. But we can still think of a way to force the Horde to attack South Shore again." Duque changed the topic. "Really?" The Alliance's leaders were overjoyed. "I have to remind everyone that this is not a good thing," Duque said in a low voice. "Why?" Lang asked. "I plan to hang Blackhand's head and the flag of the previous chief at the port of South Shore. This will make the Horde attack South Shore again, but it will also make the last group of orcs who openly oppose the new chief, Orgrim, die." After a moment of silence, Noxus said, "Let's do that. I've thought about it. This will increase the Horde's combat power in a short period of time, but it will also weaken the Horde's fighting potential." Everyone came to a realization. The orcs who were unhappy with Orgrim might change their minds in the future, but if they died now, there would be no future for them. In the past winter, the orcs must have gone out with their wives and children. Before the new generation of orcs grew up, there would be 1 less orc dead. Then it's decided. We will force the Horde to attack South Shore. At the same time, we will see if we can fight the Horde at sea and regain control of the sea. That afternoon, Black Hand's huge frozen head was placed on the lighthouse at South Shore's port. At the same time, a battle flag of the previous chief was placed there. Kurtiraz's fleet deliberately sent out the Horde's scouting boats to watch, and even ignored the scouting boats that came to check. Yes, I want you orcs to know. Duke's ruthless move caused a lot of trouble for Orgrim on the orc side. This is blasphemy. Blasphemy against the warriors of the Horde. Blasphemy against the glory of the Horde. Attack South Shore and kill all the humans. Turn their chief's head into a pot of urine. A great number of chieftains of small and medium clans were clamoring in Orgrim. Their clamoring annoyed Orgrim to no end. This was the result of Orgrim's lack of prestige. Do you want the warriors of the Horde to break through the strongest defense line of the humans? Let the warriors of the Horde die for nothing? Orgrim cursed. The orcs are invincible. The weak defense line of the humans can't stop our battle axes. This was already a spiritual victory. Great Chief. As long as we can stop the human warships, the warriors of the Horde are invincible. This guy wasn't that stupid after all. Great Chief, would you rather trust those dead humans and traitors who betrayed your own people than trust the warriors of your tribe? A chief brought up the Death Knights and the traitors of the Bloodsail pirates, causing Orgrim's eyelids to twitch. In that instant, Orgrim had the urge to smash that guy's head with his hammer. Of course, the defeat at South Shore was partly a test, but wasn't it because the former Great Chief, Black Hand, was too prodigal? If he had enough elite soldiers, Orgrim wouldn't have accepted the Death Knights. Orgrim was extremely annoyed. All right. All chiefs who are willing to attack South Shore, please step forward. The orcs' new fleet will open the way for you. In an instant, dozens of chiefs from small and medium clans stepped forward. Their numbers were so many that Orgrim almost went crazy. At this moment, the chief of the Dragonmaw clan, Zuluhid, gave Orgrim a look. When Orgrim turned to look at Grom Hellhowl, Master Howl gave him a nod of approval. All right. As you wish. Here's our plan this time. Chapter 301. The 26th of March, Year 2 of the Dark Portal. A large-scale sea-crossing battle that did not exist in history had begun. It was different from the previous probing attack. This time the Horde had turned out in full force. The Alliance's scouts had risked their lives to report that the orcs had filled all the beaches in the wetlands where ships could be boarded. It was estimated that the Horde would send 500,000 troops this time. The orcs would either send this batch of troops to the northern continent or feed them to the fishes in the sea. They knew that more than a third of the 500,000 orcs were laborers, and there were many new recruits who had arrived through the Dark Portal. Compared to the previous 500,000 orcs, their combat power had decreased by at least 30%. That number was still quite frightening. Have those beastmen gone mad? Every noble and neutral Dalaran mages who had heard of this news were shocked. It was only then that Rotterdam, Dalajan, and Alterac quickly passed a resolution for an all-out war, and the entire kingdom began to mobilize. "I hope we can make it through this time," Noxus muttered. On the flagship of the First Fleet of Kuel Salis, Admiral Dalin was staring at the sea map. Looking at the 3 blood-red model ships that represented the 3 fleets, Dalin was distraught. Apart from the time when the Third Fleet got too close, Dalin had never taken the Orc Navy seriously. This time the enemy was not the silly Orc transport ships that were almost like targets. Not only was there an Orc battleship of unknown strength, but there was also his old rival, the former Duke of Kul Tiras, Fairville. Fairville had once challenged him for the throne, so Dalin did not dare to underestimate him. Even though the quality of the new batch of Bloodsail battleships was not as good as the original Kul Tiras battleships, the quantity was there. After Fairville's training, the standard of the pirates would not be too bad. Even if it was not the highest level of threat, Kul Tiras' battleship would at least have to deal with it. At this moment, a visitor shocked Dalin. When he finished speaking, Dalin could not believe his ears. "Is what you said true?" The visitor nodded and left. It was late at night. On the other side of the wetlands, the Paladin Bay was shrouded in darkness. Dark clouds covered the sky, completely blocking every ray of moonlight that attempted to shine onto the sea. Every ship of the Bloodsail fleet was moving up and down rhythmically on the waves. For pirates who made a living on the sea, this was the norm. A large number of pirates pulled out their hammocks in the narrow cabin and slept soundly. The stern of every large ship was, by default, the captain's lounge. Miss Jessie Ferryville was the only heir to Duke Ferryville after her brother was blasted into the sky by the Blackwater pirates. She was already 16 years old, but because she had a little dwarf blood in her, she looked short and strong. Looking at her muscular back, anyone would think that she was a man. Miss Jessie has been very upset lately. She felt that her father had gone mad. He actually sided with the orcs who killed for fun and conquered all the intelligent races in the Azeroth. What was more unacceptable was that the entire Bloodsail pirates seemed to have been kidnapped. Every ship had 2 orcs the size of a small hill watching every captain. They did not understand the human language, but according to the chief of the tribe, if they discovered that the Bloodsail pirates were trying to betray them, they would have to pay the price in blood. Pirates were never clean people. Not bathing for a few months was not a big deal in their long voyages. But the 2 smelly female orcs blocking the door of his room refreshed the lower limit of Jessie's senses. The destructive stench that she had not bathed for many years made it impossible for Jessie to sleep through the door. Jessie could only think of other things to distract herself. "I'm going out to sea tomorrow to settle things with Kul Tiras? Damn it, this is not a duel that father or I want." At this moment, a dagger was silently pressed against her throat, early morning on the 27th of March. Oh, oh, oh. The huge horns that stretched from the top of the Orc Archer Tower to the ground let out a long and deep sound, followed by the sound of drums that shook the sky. Every orc on the coast and every pirate on the sea knew that the day of the final battle had come. Thump, thump, thump. Looking from the ship, it felt as though the whole world was shaking. This was not an illusion. Even at sea, with the ship swaying with the waves, the Bloodsail pirates could clearly see that the branches on the coast were trembling slightly, the sand on the beach was rising and falling, and the puddles of water in the wetlands seemed to form a layer of waves, shaking violently. The Duke of Fairville stood a short distance from the rudder, gripping the railings of the ship tightly. Earthquake. Even on the sea, Duke Fairville could clearly feel the rumbling of the earth coming from the sea. His first mate shook his head firmly. If this was an illusion, then it was an illusion that the entire Bloodsail pirates had tens of thousands of people on board. Ah, that is our invincible Horde army. Standing beside Duke Fairville, an orc with a giant axe who seemed to be more intelligent spoke in the common language with an extremely strange accent. The entire blood sail fleet was in an uproar. All the blood sail pirates stopped what they were doing and stared in horror at the bright, dazzling green that appeared on the east coast. A moment ago, the endless swamps stretched from the coast to the limits of their vision. In the distance, some unknown substance floated in the shallow swamp, emitting an unpleasant smell into the air. Countless lake-like mud pits had split the green land into a mess, and there was no straight path at all. Now hundreds of thousands of orcs had appeared. They ran wildly, roared, and pushed each other as they swarmed towards the sea from the horizon. They seemed to be driven by the dawn, moving desperately towards the darkness that was about to be driven away. All of the orcs had 2 legs, 2 arms and green skin, but that was the extent of their similarities. Some of the orcs were as large as burly humans, while others had stepped into the category of giants. There were also a few orcs with 2 heads and bloated bodies that were completely at the level of giants. Without exception, all of them ran wildly towards the shore. Chapter 302. The orcs and ogres were very different, but in that green tide they all felt the same. The bloodsail pirates could only see the green tide crossing every swamp with water, stepping on every inch of turf, and smashing everything in its way. Perhaps there were colorful snakes escaping from the swamps under the feet of the orcs, but they were all crushed. Pits, hills, swamps. Everywhere the eye could see, the green orcs surged out like a tide. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, more ships appeared on land. In order to prevent the transport ships they had built from being destroyed by the humans who had the upper hand in the sea, the orcs used a more simple and crude method to protect their ships. These transport ships, which were dozens of tons each, were all placed on the shore and piled up in places where the cannons could not reach. When the orcs were about to launch an attack, the orc laborers would drag the bottom of the ships into the water. The heavy, clumsy but clearly moving transport ships formed a huge wave that slowly moved towards the sea. Watching the fleet sailing on land moving towards them, the bloodsail pirates remained silent and observed everything in front of them in awe. Duke Fairville had lived his entire life at sea, but he had never seen anything like this before. Countless orcs were covering the entire area. They used their strong bodies, arms with explosive muscles, big mouths full of fangs, blood-red eyes and green skin to weave a world-class blanket, covering every corner of the sun. Fairville was filled with regret. He knew that if he had transported this terrifying fleet across the northern continent, the destruction of the humans would have entered the countdown. But beside him, an orc sword saint did not give him any face as he wiped his sword. This was a powerful warrior who killed without batting an eyelid. More than a dozen of his best sailors had tried to kill him, but none of them could get within 2 meters of him. Seeing the transport ships being thrown into the water, Fairville glanced at his daughter Jessie's flagship, which was 50 meters away. Jessie gave him a sign that only he could understand. All fleets weigh anchor. Set sail. The target is the damned fleet of courtiers. Duke Fairville shouted. More than 10 minutes later, in response to the flash of dawn, the entire bloodsail fleet pierced straight into the sea like a curved arc. They were about to sail northward from the Gulf of Baladine, cross the sea that separated the 2 continents, and strike upon the fleet of Courtireth, who must be waiting on the surface. The damp scent of early spring was mixed with the wind and brushed past Orgrim's nose. The undulating waves of the orcs were perfectly connected with the rolling waves of the vast sea. Orgrim was riding a giant white wolf on top of a hill by the sea. From afar, it looked like he was standing on top of the waves. Looking at the shining horizon at the end of his vision, Orgrim couldn't help but feel proud. He pointed his hammer of destruction into the distance and said, "As long as I can cross this ocean, I'll be able to do it. The warriors of the Horde can destroy any resistance from any living creature in any world. We will." The famous Grom Hellscream carried his equally fearsome Bloodhowl axe and came to Orgrim's side. "Even though I've always thought that races other than the orcs are unreliable, and I don't like your attitude towards other races, I like your ability to solve problems." Orgrim didn't seem to care about Grom's complaints. He lightly bumped his huge hammer against Bloodhowl's axe. The 2 famous weapons of mass destruction let out a dull sound of heavy weapons colliding. "The strongest human kingdom is Lordaeron. See you at Lordaeron." Orgrim bared his teeth. "See you at Lordaeron." Grom didn't look back as he walked down the hill, leaving a trail of deep footprints and a bright silhouette. The orc transport fleet was still sending people in. The bloodsail fleet and the main orc fleet had already encountered the enemy at around 10 in the morning. An ultralight, fast, elven-styled scout ship appeared on the horizon. Then, just as the blood sail fleet sounded the alarm, a sail appeared on the horizon. Duke Fairville furrowed his brows. It was too early. The entire fleet hadn't even left the Paladin Bay before they encountered the full force of courtiers. It seemed that the Alliance's navy had made up their minds to wipe out the blood sail and orc fleets here and regain control of the sea. What's going on? Duke Fairville couldn't help but look at his daughter's flagship half a nautical mile to his right. But since we've met, let's fight. Pass the order. Turn right 40 degrees. We need to gain the upper hand. The Duke's order was met with ruthless opposition. An orc who knew the common language slammed his axe against the guardrail. Don't be so complicated. Just attack. Damn it. Gaining the upper hand is common sense. The Great Horde doesn't need your so-called common sense. We just need you to get close enough to the enemy's ships. The warriors of the Fireblade clan will solve all problems, the orc said in a low, muffled voice. It wasn't that Duke Fairville hadn't heard of a certain orc chief who single-handedly destroyed a few of Courtira's ships. He just didn't think that the orcs would use such a simple and violent method to solve all problems. This went against all common sense in naval warfare. No, it wasn't just common sense. Fairville could clearly feel the orcs' distrust. That evil great tribal chief was eager for his bloodsail fleet to perish together with the human fleet, so that the beastmen's transport ships could safely pass through every sea in the world. But the situation was beyond his control. The Duke finally waved his hand. 10 seconds later, a blood-red coat of arms unfurled on his flagship. This idiotic order was immediately sent by the command ships to confirm the flag number again and again. Gritting his teeth, he confirmed. Just like that, the entire bloodsail and orc fleet split into two columns and charged forward like idiots. The more rational Alliance fleet was like a crab baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. The fleet spread out like a pincer, surrounding the enemy in half an hour. At 10:45 in the morning, the famous Battle of the Paladin Bay began. Chapter 303. Later generations' evaluation of the Battle of Paladin Bay was one-sided. Of course, this was not a traditional naval battle either. The collision of the two ideologies made this naval battle a little strange. Traditional human navies pursued the doctrine of large ships and cannons. The orc navies, on the other hand, played a typical battle with white soldiers. In a sense, the orcs were also very good at this. This was not the cannon before Duquesne's transmigration, which could fire tens of kilometers. Even the World War II gunships couldn't fire at a distance of 20,000 meters. The clumsy, unrifled breech-loading cannons had a range of less than a kilometer. This was not a problem for the orc sword saints who could walk on the waves. Hellscream dismantled a Gundam with its bare hands. Oh, it was Bloodhowl dismantling a warship. This was a good lesson for the orcs. The orc warships were not weak at all against the wind. The cannons on the orc warships were basically decorations. After all, it was just a large transport ship that could move. As soon as they entered 2 nautical miles, many sampans were released from the huge garbage ships. The peons pushed these modified small turtle-shell ships and headed straight for the warships of Kul Tiras. Human cannons were very useful against ships, but they should have been at a loss against these small ships. Not to mention there were more than a dozen orc sword saints who came on the waves. Admiral Dylin saw that the orcs' tactics were as expected and let out a long sigh of relief. In the sea, tens of meters deep, a blue and white magic light suddenly lit up. This light was so dense that no orc could detect it except for the orc sword saints. The next moment, ice rain rose from the bottom of the sea towards the sky. Bright, beautiful, it had nothing to do with nature, it was accompanied by death. The Murloc Sage's frost arrow had terrible destructive power, but it wasn't a problem for it to pierce through the bottom of a small boat. The Murloc's unique talent could make the seawater open up a path for the frost arrow, allowing it to accurately pierce through the weak bottom of the boat. Ah, good kill. Looking at the small boats that were paddling and trying to get close stop one after another, and the hulls entered the water, Admiral Dylin laughed heartily. It was not that the orc sword saints did not think of taking care of these hindering Murlocs. Firstly, underwater combat was not their forte, and secondly, there were some stronger people to deal with them. Murloc Prophet Magar, Furious Scale Naga Vara, Spiny Naga Syphilis, and a large number of Naga Siren priests were all here. Ha-ha-ho-la-la. Chanting an incantation of unknown meaning, Magar suddenly unleashed a powerful attack. In the sea, the Murlocs and Naga had natural magic bonuses. Not to mention that this was a battlefield that had been set up long ago. At the bottom of the water, inconspicuous conches, clamshells dozens of meters deep, and the most inconspicuous dead corals suddenly emitted the unique brilliance of magic. Two dots formed a line and many lines formed a pattern. At that time, the Beastman Sword Saint suddenly discovered that there was a huge magic array over 100 square meters in diameter at the bottom of the sea. Walla la la, the only 3 fingers on each of Mager's hands trembled convulsively. His eyes turned white and a crazed look appeared on his face. The next moment the sea sank. In an instant, the sea level within a radius of 300 meters suddenly sank by more than 30 meters. A huge whirlpool rapidly formed. On the side, the magic stirred up 100-meter wave easily swept everything in the whirlpool into the bottom of the sea. The Sword Saints of the Fireblade clan were powerful, but they did not fight underwater. The bottom of the sea was the world of sea creatures. In the magic array, countless jellyfish-like tentacles rose up, pulling the Sword Saints deeper into the sea. The Sword Saints held their breath and worked hard to cut the jellyfish tentacles in the water with considerable resistance. However, when they cut 1, 3, 5, 10 more would follow. Not to mention that they were a living person, even a big ship might not be able to resist such a strange tactic. Loktar Ogre? If they did not win they would rather die. None of the orcs showed fear on their faces. Only more orc speedboats attempted to bypass the whirlpool by paddling quickly to kill Kul Tira's fleet. On the flagship, Daelin held a scimitar in his right hand and a short-barreled musket in his left, watching the scene quietly. A calm smile appeared on his face. Well, my old friend, now it's time for you to make a choice. But before that... Whoa! A green phantom approached at high speed. He was so fast that just the splash of water under his feet created a long white line on the surface of the sea. Not a single long-range weapon could hit this elusive figure. Just like that, he crossed the distance of 7 or 8 meters between the sea and the side of the ship like a bolt of lightning and suddenly reached the deck. Naturally, the small fries could not catch him. However, what greeted him was a war hammer with a holy golden glow. Clang. With a deafening clang, the Orc Sword Saint and the newcomer clashed without any fancy moves. I am Paladin Tyrion Fordring. Tell me your name, Orc. Before Duque's transmigration, Tyrion had been called the Empress Dowager by countless players. This was the most powerful moment of his life. The sea breeze ruffled his hair and beard, making this young knight look even more extraordinary. Galeo. The Orc Sword Saint only spat out this name before he immediately charged forward and fought the Empress Dowager. This was not all the orcs had. To catch bandits, one had to catch their leader first. Orcs knew this trick as well. A cold glint of a sword appeared behind Daelin. No one on the ship knew where it came from except Daelin himself. Clang. With an unconventional scimitar, the shining edge of the scimitar perfectly blocked the sharp blade that was supposed to pierce through Daelin's chest. Bang bang. 2 gunshots rang out almost at the same time. The ambusher was a complete idiot. Not only did he fail, he was also hit by a musket. This wasn't an ordinary single-barreled gun. It was meant for a king, so how could it be low level? Even though the gun was fired with a trigger, the barrel of the gun glowed with the brilliance of a magic circle. The complicated and mysterious blue runes only appeared on the barrel the moment the gun was fired. Moreover, it was a single-barreled gun, but it could fire 2 consecutive shots under the effect of magic. Whoever was hit by it would die. Wow! An Orc Sword Saint with a red flag on his back, a string of huge white beads around his neck, and a single-edged broadsword in his hand groaned as he took 3 steps back and revealed himself. Despicable. He spoke in standard common language. Daelin's handsome face, which had been baptized by the sea breeze, smiled proudly. Hey, I don't want to be called despicable by an orc who only knows how to sneak up on me. We're at most on the same level. Don't you think so? Samuro. That's right. It was the Orc Sword Saint, Samuro. Umph. With a snort, Samuro swung his blade and pounced forward. Chapter 304. The difference in strength between the 7 human kings was huge. The ones who could fight were humanoid nuclear bombs like Antonidas, while the ones who couldn't, such as Tyrrhena's or Eden, would be blown away by the wind. Overall, Thoradin the Great's martial spirit had been passed down. Lang and Salash Trollbane's strength was above average. King Xion's strength was also off the charts after learning to transform, only slightly weaker than Queen Sylvia. Of course, King Daelin was also quite fierce, stepping into the realm of heroes. If it wasn't for the infuriating incident where he betrayed his father, Daelin wouldn't have been killed by Rexer and the other Horde heroes. Now, in a one-on-one battle, Daelin, who was still in his prime, was fighting Samuro. The Horde sent out strong fighters to attack, and the warships of both sides were still closing in on each other. About 1,000 meters away, on Duke Fairville's ship, the Beastman in charge of monitoring the Duke gasped when he saw the arc of light from his hero's slash. "Huh. I didn't expect the humans to have strong fighters." The Beastmen worshipped the strong. To them, a strong fighter could earn their respect beyond their race. 1,000 meters away, a person was just a small dot. But this didn't stop him from knowing that Samuro hadn't taken down the enemy's leader. "The humans have more strong fighters than you think," Duke Fairville said coldly. "But that doesn't include you," the Beastman said harshly. "Umph." The Duke snorted, and the Beastman's sword sank behind him, took a step forward, clearly threatening him. "Now you can play your favorite cannon battle." The Beastman's arrogant order almost angered Fairville half to death. "You're not even giving me the upper hand. Now that your brainless assault team is no longer effective, you want to let my ship take the lead?" The frustration and helplessness almost drove Fairville crazy. What else could Fairville do? Right now he and his fleet were like meat on the chopping board. He had to raise his hand and signal that he was ready to fire. "Target the Beastman's trash battleships," a cold voice interrupted the Duke's words. Without giving anyone time to react, an ice-cold aura instantly exploded on the ship. A bone-chilling cold swept past everyone's face like lightning, but the only ones who were frozen were the Beastmen in charge of guarding and the Sword Saint. In less than 1/100th of a second, all the Beastmen near Duke Fairville had turned into ice sculptures. Every single orc's ferocious expression, their tensed muscles, their half-drawn blades, all the details could be seen clearly. Unfortunately, they were just ice sculptures that had lost their lives. A figure in blue and white robes suddenly appeared less than 3 meters in front of Duke Fairville. "Sir Duke Marcus, I didn't expect you, the Alliance's vice commander, to personally take action," the Duke muttered to himself. Duque confidently appeared and raised his hand, casting an icicle spell that was mixed with the characteristics of a tornado, easily sending those beastmen flying over the side of the ship. Just before the ice cubes fell into the sea, a continuous kacha sound stimulated the eardrums of every blood sail pirate. Right before their eyes, the Beastman watchers who had been threatening them for more than a month turned into beautiful ice crystals that dissipated with the wind. With great power comes great responsibility. Even the commander Lothar can charge at the front, so why can't I, the vice commander, do the same? Amidst the laughter, the watchers turned into ashes. The one who killed the watchers on Jesse Fairville's ship was Vanessa Van Cleef. The incompetent little maid who had just returned from a short period of training at Ravenholt Manor had sliced the Beastman into 18 pieces with lightning-quick strikes. It wasn't just her. The assassins from MI7 and Stormwind had struck at lightning speed, killing every Beastman on every Bloodsail pirate ship. One after another, the Bloodsail pirate ships raised the flag of the Alliance. At this point, even the slowest of the Horde knew that the Bloodsail pirates had rebelled. "I told you that humans are unreliable," the Beastman captain on the Horde's warship roared angrily. He had the unskilled Beastmen change the direction of the huge sails in an attempt to catch up to the Bloodsail pirate warships while the wind was against them. The Bloodsail pirate fleet was undoubtedly at a disadvantage against the Alliance's naval fleet. However, the Bloodsail pirate fleet had the upper hand against the Horde's huge warships. The Bloodsail pirate fleet's sudden change of tack brought great trouble to the Horde's warships. The original numerical advantage had instantly turned into a huge disparity in strength. Bang, bang, bang. The Bloodsail pirate fleet opened fire. The huge shrapnel shot toward the masts of the Horde's warships hundreds of meters away. The well-trained and experienced Bloodsail cannoneers easily destroyed most of the masts and sails of the Horde's warships in 2 or 3 rounds of bombardment. The Bloodsail pirate fleet tried their best to steer their ships in an S-shape on the sea while trying to distance themselves from the Horde's warships to avoid being hit by the Alliance's cannons. After losing their masts and even their oars were cut off by Duques Naga's trident, the Horde's huge warships were like a pile of garbage floating on the sea, helplessly and hopelessly enduring the Alliance's attacks. At this time, the Bloodsail pirate fleet was the first to cease fire. Why cease fire? Duque frowned slightly. If you knew the structure of the Horde's warships, you would know that cannons are useless against them, Duke Fairville explained. It's all because of those damn goblins. Fairville's eyes flashed with hatred at the mention of those short and greedy green-skinned creatures. The Horde's warships are the masterpiece of those goblins in Booty Bay. Last night, it was Vanessa and Duque who snuck into Jesse's captain's room and learned that the Bloodsail pirate fleet had been forced to join the Horde's camp. In the past winter, Orgrim sent the Horde's army south to Stranglethorn Vale, where the climate was warmer. The despicable goblins did not surrender in the face of the Horde's army. Instead, they made the Horde let go of Booty Bay in a way that Orgrim was very satisfied with. The first thing they did was to sell out their enemy, the Bloodsail pirate fleet. The Horde lacked a fleet, so the evil goblins suggested Orgrim to swallow up the Bloodsail pirate fleet. It was the middle of winter at that time, and almost all the Bloodsail pirate fleet were on land in the Bloodsail fortress. In the end, they were all wiped out by the invincible orcs. Of course, how could an ambitious and ruthless person like Orgrim allow the goblins to be his spear? That was why they had this super warship that Duque called a large piece of garbage. Other than the hull of the ship that was covered with iron sheets and was symbolically equipped with 10 cannons, the rest of the space was a crazy warship that was covered with protective baffles. Chapter 305. From the start, Duque knew that Orgrim's focus was not on the naval battle itself. Win or lose, as long as more than 60% of the transport ships reached the landing site, it would be a victory for the Beastmen. More than 80% would be a crushing victory. Looking at the horizon, Duque could clearly see the Horde's transport ships filling up the entire sea. There were so many of them that it was enough to make one's scalp go numb. Completely ignoring the naval battle, the transport ships headed north at high speed. Every Beastman laborer in the ships rowed with all their might, as if they wanted to vent all their energy on the sea. After receiving a warning from the system genie, Duque set his sights on one of the Beastman warships. He quickly issued a few orders. Vara, have your men use drills to take care of the Beastman warships. I want these rubbish piles to sink into the sea and turn into coral reefs. Magar, after you've dealt with the sacred swordsman, attack the transport ships. Duque turned to Fairville. Don't worry about Dylan and don't worry about your position in the Alliance. As I promised, as long as you fight this battle well, you and your fleet will be under Stormwind's command. A so-called duke who had left his own kingdom and was only left with a noble position in name, and had become a pirate, of course he could not be compared to Duke, who was the most popular person in the Alliance. Fervier bowed deeply, but no one noticed that Fervier's face was twitching in pain. Kurtira's 2nd and 4th fleets, the original Stormwind Kingdom's fleet, and the Bloodsail fleet sailed northeast at high speed. They wanted to send as many beastmen as possible to the bottom of the sea to feed the fishes while the beastmen were defenseless. Duque jumped out of the ship, and the surging seawater froze beneath his feet. This time there was no need to save 50,000 Stormwind soldiers, and Duque did not waste any mana. He only kept the ice within a radius of 50 meters. As the waves surged, Duque bobbed up and down on the ice. Of course, Duque was indeed close to a huge beastman warship. At this moment, a few huge figures appeared. Duque narrowed his eyes. 2 demonic guards wielding large weapons and 2 even larger apocalypse guards. These 4 demons lined up and surrounded the Beastman Warlock in the middle as they floated above the sea. Greetings, human mage, I am Lakama Sharktooth, Warlock of the Storm Marauder clan. The old and hunchbacked orc politely placed his left hand on his chest and saluted Duque. Duque frowned. Sure enough, he had messed up the course of the world. Lakama Sharktooth was indeed a famous ranker. Before Ghoul, Dan fell into a coma because of Mediv, he was the unofficial leader of the Shadow Council, second only to Ghoul, Dan. The problem was that in normal history this old warlock was slaughtered by Ghoul, Dan, and used as a test subject to create a Death Knight. Why was he still alive? Furthermore, he was so strong. As if he was disgusted by the surging waves, a terrifying black aura spread out from his body, and the huge waves were completely separated in a radius of 200 meters around him and Duke. It was the sea, but the surface was as calm as a lake. Countless fish and prawns that could not escape in time lost their lives under the dark power and floated to the surface. More than 10 teleportation doors opened around Lakama. More demons came out. More than 100 imps, dozens of burly void walkers, 20 coquettish succubi, and 10 demon hounds. Of course, the most powerful ones were the demonic guards. There were already more than 200 of them and they were still increasing. This was practically a small demon army. Could a demon warlock who specialized in demon element be this powerful? Or should I say, as expected of the former number 2 powerhouse of the Shadow Council? The ice under his feet continued to extend forward. Duque continued to walk forward and answered in a loud voice. Duke Marcus. Reputation was such a thing. No matter how honorable you were, if the other party did not know about you, they would not care about you. Once you were famous, whether it was for fame or notoriety, your name would be your calling card. Once you announced your name, all the notes would appear in the other party's mind. Not many beastmen would know the names of the kings of the 7 kingdoms of the human alliance, even if there were countless beastmen wreaking havoc in the ruins of Stormwind City. Perhaps many beastmen remembered Lothar who had killed the previous great chief, but there was only one human that the entire tribe was familiar with. He was the destroyer of over 200,000 beastmen, the Inferno Apostle in the eyes of the beastmen, the most sinister and cunning great demon king, Duke Marcus. A gurgling sound came from Lakima's throat, followed by a strange demonic cry that was neither human nor beast. Wah! A large amount of dark aura shot out from the gaps between the bone spurs and the muscles on his back. Then Lakima took out a bloody necklace from his space storage and put it around his neck. Duke's pupils suddenly shrank, and the muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably in anger. It was very simple. Every bead on the necklace was a shrunken human head, the head of the Storm Royal Mage Legion. He didn't have any deep relationships with them. Most of them were just nodding acquaintances to Duke, but every single one of them once had the same status as Duke. Using their heads to make a forbidden magic tool was undoubtedly a blasphemy to the entire Stormwind City and even the entire Alliance. Slap, slap. Even though he was not attacked, Duke felt as if he had been slapped multiple times. His entire face was burning and stinging. Hee. Angry? Dissatisfied? No problem, you will soon become one of them. Ever since we fought with you human mages, it has been a lucky day for us warlocks. As long as we concentrate whatever magic circuit you have in your head and customize it, we can increase our spellcasting ability exponentially. Ah! Lakimard laughed wildly and waved his hand. 10 of the largest teleportation portals appeared. 10 terrifying yellow-skinned demons with huge demonic wings stepped through the teleportation portals. The moment they appeared, they cast Water Float and stared at Duke viciously. Duke suddenly raised his head. I have never liked to torture the souls of my defeated opponents, but for you I have decided to make an exception. Chapter 306. Another warlock, a true beastman powerhouse. In the system notification, the glaring red mark told Duke how dangerous his opponent was. The only good thing was that there was no skull mark on the power comparison panel. This was the era of heroes. Not many of the famous powerhouses were unworthy of their name. Since he knew that his opponent was once the second in command of the Shadow Council, Duke had no reason to hold back. Perhaps the two-headed ogre magician Gujar who came from the Dark Portal a few months ago was Ghoul, Dan's new favorite, but that was just another name on the list of targets that Duke had to defeat. Inhaling a mouthful of water vapor, Duke immediately saw a dense rain of fireballs whizzing toward him from the group of imps. Duke reached out and drew a line from his left and right, and a translucent wall of water immediately appeared in front of the ice block beneath his feet. It was at least 5 meters tall and 20 meters wide. Duke pushed forward, and the thick wall of water immediately surged forward like a real tide, producing a rumbling sound. As a low-level demon, the fireballs of the imps were not very powerful. Like a cigarette but falling into the water, they were extinguished the moment they hit the wall of water. Umph. Lakima snorted coldly. He actually ignored the situation on the surface of the sea and waved his hand, sending a rain of fire toward Duke's face. Sizzle! The rain of fire fell on the surface of the sea, forming a wall of fire that was larger and thicker than Duke's wall of water. It pushed back in Duke's direction. There was a series of kacha, kacha. Continuous sounds of ice shattering could be heard. The frozen sea in front of Duke was completely shattered. The huge force caused the shattered ice to roll back toward Duke. It was as if there was a hailstorm in front of Duke. However, the ice cubes did not fall. They were decomposed by the high temperature in midair. They first turned into snow powder, then instantly sublimated into water vapor, and finally turned into nothingness. Duke knew that Lakima had found out the difference in strength between the two sides. That's right, in terms of the quality of his magic, Lakima should be at the peak of the Morningstar realm. With the addition of the necklace made from the heads of more than 10 human wizards, Lakima's strength had risen sharply. In terms of the total amount of magic, he should be at the level of a first-rank Radiant Moon wizard. Duke sneered. I won't lose in terms of total magic power. The next moment, Lakima's demon hounds charged. When warlocks fought against mages, they basically relied on these evil dogs. The devil hound was a piece of cake for physical-type professions. This kind of dog-shaped demon that was entirely red, had 2 horns and 2 strange tentacles. There was nothing outstanding about it in terms of attack, defense, speed, and so on. In fact, it was even below the average standard of most demons. The most disgusting thing about the devil hounds was that they were anti-magic. It was not appropriate to say that magic was forbidden. To be more precise, the demon hounds could emit an elemental light wave to disrupt the spellcasting of mages. Not only did it prevent low-level mages from absorbing the elements of the elemental realm, but it could also take advantage of the mage's spellcasting to send chaotic energy currents into the mage's magic circuit. To put it bluntly, it was a sh*t stirring stick. Disgusting but effective. Every devil hound stared at Duque, trying to attack when Duque was chanting and give Duque a greater blow. However, they were disappointed. In other words, Duque's attack was beyond the imagination of these low-intelligence dog-shaped demons. Duque did not use any magic himself. It was all done by the system elf. Without any warning, 108 magic hands appeared neatly behind Duque. The magic hands glowed with a faint blue arcane light. Dazzling light flashed between the fingers, and the devil hounds that were dozens of meters away from the magic hands were pierced by huge ice spikes that protruded from the surface of the sea. After the ice spikes that were as thick as the mouth of a bull pierced through their hearts, more ice spikes pierced the devil hounds. Ha! Lakima's face darkened. The magic resistance of the demon hounds was quite high. In contrast, their physical resistance was terrible. Turning ice magic into a physical form to attack the devil hounds showed that Duque had rich experience in fighting against demon warlocks. Despite Duque's title of Beastman Butcher, Duque rarely fought in magic battles. Apart from the 100-armed Reaper, whose strength was unknown, this was the first time Duque fought against a warlock on an official occasion. Lakima instinctively thought of Duque as a weakling from the academy. Arctic extension. Duque shouted. This time he finally made a move himself. Without the hindering devil hounds, he did not have to worry about being interrupted. Even with the help of the system, Duque was very confident that he could quickly adjust the chaos of the magic circuit. However, he did not want to be silenced if he could. Warlocks could grind down energy consumption. Demon warlocks were the most shameless of all warlocks. What was supposed to be a one-on-one fight turned into a group fight. It would be great if he could play as a mower, but he was afraid of other things. Just as Duque turned the second wave of succubi and devil guards into ice sculptures. Lakima, who was on the other side, quickly used hand gestures and evil incantations to cast curses and magic. Most shaman orc warlocks seemed to like to attach curses and other curse rings to certain totem poles. When necessary, they could draw them back from the totem poles. Thus, their casting speed was extremely fast. Almost at the same time, Duque also felt the changes in his body. Pain, convulsions, fatigue, heat, weakness. Looking at the series of negative statuses that appeared on his retina, Duque felt like he was about to burst into tears. You are affected by the curse of pain, you are affected by the curse of fatigue. There were more than 10 curses of various sizes and 7 to 8 negative statuses. Even if there were 100 orcs, their life force would be drained in an instant, let alone a human like Duque. Without hesitation, Duque immediately activated the ice barrier. A cold sensation instantly spread throughout his body. Apart from the ice element, all other elements and powers were instantly expelled from his body. Iske, Lakima snorted coldly. He was originally planning to wait for the invincibility of the ice barrier to end before giving Duque all the curses and debuffs. Who knew that a storm that he had never seen before would engulf his demon army? White frost, red flames, and purple arcane magic. 3 different elements were perfectly blended together and shot towards his demon army. Frostfire arrow? It was not that Lakima had never seen this spell before. It was a damaging spell that absorbed the essence of 3 different types of magic at the same time. It was very effective against any type of enemy. If it could be used consecutively, even a demon warlock with a high defense would have a headache. Now Lakima had a headache. Chapter 307. Duque, who had frozen himself in the ice, was still standing there like an ice sculpture, but Lakima could hear the chanting of spells in unison. It was the same voice as Duque's. The chanting was so clear that Lakima could even hear every syllable. The question was, who was chanting? In the air there were no people or mouths. There were only 108 hands of magic. The white elemental hands pushed the tricolored energy balls in their palms forward, and Lakima saw a storm forming. A storm of frostfire arcane arrows. Each of his attacks had the power of a peak sky mage at full strength. It was the same as 108 peak sky mages attacking at the same time. Lakima's green face turned dark green. The huge and glamorous light spun at a high speed, crossed the sea, and pierced through the bodies of the demons who had been buffed by water float. In an instant, they were torn into pieces and fell into the sea like a rain of blood and flesh. Almost immediately, Lakima's demons were left with only the strongest apocalypse guards. These huge yellow-skinned demons flapped their long bat wings and withstood this round of attacks with some difficulty. Lakima raised his hand, and the huge apocalypse guards charged at Duque at a high speed. However, a second and third round of frostfire arrows poured down on the apocalypse guards. Lakima watched in shock as his demon army, which was enough to destroy an entire army of 5,000 humans, was beaten down by the storm of magic arrows released by the hands of magic. Duque ended ice barrier. Lakima's fear worked. Duque fell into a terrifying illusion like an idiot and spun around on the ice like a drunkard. Although his willpower was quite impressive, he recovered in a second. Logically speaking, a mage who was in a state of mental confusion could not continue to cast spells. But Duque did it. The 36 hands of magic formed a group to release frostfire arrows, never stopping from beginning to end, and automatically aimed at the enemy to pour fire. There was no problem with the accuracy. It was as if every frostfire arrow was controlled by a mage. Regardless of whether the apocalypse guard dodged or blocked, the frostfire arrow would automatically adjust its angle and accurately hit the apocalypse guard's weak spot. At this moment, Lakima almost suspected that Duque had done the same thing as him, enslaving a group of mages and using their souls to cast spells for him. Unfortunately, there was no time for Lakima to hesitate. He gritted his teeth and unleashed all the curses and negative spells he had stored on the totem pole on Duque. Duque's crown of ice magic circuit spun rapidly, instantly activating rapid cooldown. This gave Duque the capital to activate ice barrier again. The powerful ice element once again drove away all the curses. Then, you finished casting instant curses? His magic power was depleted? Pray then, damn the greenskins. Here comes the punishment of destruction. Along with Duque's angry roar, the 10 arcane circuits, the 100 arcane circuits, and the entire arcane throne magic circuit rumbled. How many times did the massive arcane energy circulate in a second in the magic circuit? How many times did the explosive energy that was akin to a nuclear generator increase? Duque had already lost count. As if responding to the rage of the morning star Duque, the sky suddenly turned dark. Dark clouds gathered, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. A dazzling purplish-blue light burst forth from Duque's body. This light was so glaring that Lakima could barely open his eyes. This was the top-grade metamagic ability, Arcane Energy Storm. It was a powerful attack that overloaded the entire arcane circuit and increased the energy consumption by 50%. Without hesitation, Lakima summoned 20 Voidwalkers in one go. Then, with a wave of his hands, he sacrificed all of them to form a huge protective shield around his body. Lakima was very clear that even an entire group of wizards would not be able to break through the huge protective shield that he had sacrificed 40 precious soul fragments to create. In theory, this was impossible. Even the two powerful wizards that he had discovered in South Shore that day, Kel'Thuzad and Krasus, could not do it. Now, Duque gave him a feeling that he could kill him in one blow. Lakima really wanted to summon another demon hound to harass Duque, but he could not do it. The arcane energy that exploded from Duque's body was so strong that it actually started to repel the existence of all the other elements in this area. The space became unstable. To a demon warlock who relied on summoning demons for a living, this was definitely a nightmare. No. Suddenly ripping the necklace off his neck, Lakima roared, "Fools! I order you to stop him." The badge of the royal family of storm mages on Duke's robe shone brightly under the light of the arcane spell. The enslaved souls seemed to have regained their sanity for a short moment. They roared angrily and then rejected Rakarma's order. Circles of arcane light shrunk back into Duque's right palm. The strange shrinking feeling was like a giant balloon shrinking to the size of a palm. Lakima instinctively felt that something was wrong. He really wanted to do something to Duque, but unfortunately, whether it was his shadow arrow or scorching pain, none of his attacks could directly break through Duque's ice barrier. Finally, Duque blasted out that attack. He did not know if this was the 7-layered frostfire arrow or the 7-layered arcane impact that was infused with ice and fire elements. A terrifying red, white, and blue magic energy ball that was twice the size of a carriage burst out from Duque's hand. It instantly evaporated the ice in front of him and the seawater near Lakima. The sailors and officers of the First Fleet who had not left the battlefield, the Empress Dowager Theon Dylan, and the Orc Sword Saint Samuro, all stopped fighting at the same time and watched the unforgettable scene on the surface of the sea. A white line visible to the naked eye appeared on the surface of the sea in the distance. The white line was not long, only a few dozen meters long. However, it split to the left and right, forming a horrifying deep valley that almost reached the coral reefs at the bottom of the bay. It was only a few meters away from the bottom of the sea. The deep valley was at least 30 to 40 meters wide. On both sides of the deep valley were two parallel waterfalls that were repelled by powerful magic. Damn it. Just a little bit more and it would be the legendary ocean division. Everyone's eyes widened and they forgot to breathe. Time seemed to have frozen at this moment. Until Lakama, who was fighting with Duque, turned into ashes. Until the huge cylindrical valley was once again covered by the seawater, time seemed to have returned to normal. Chapter 308. The magic battle left all the onlookers dumbfounded. Although they had already sensed the power of this orc warlock, no one knew that their own alliance deputy commander was not easy to deal with either. For a moment, Kul Tira's fleet was filled with cheers. Samuro retreated. The opponent's king was quite difficult to deal with. He could not kill the king and the king could not do anything to him. It had to be said that the king's fighting style was quite novel. He actually threw out barrels of explosives from their expensive space storage bags and detonated them with muskets. The violent, large-scale explosion was indeed a big problem for a sword saint with high attack speed like Samuro. Samuro was also injured. Since he could not take it down, Samuro retreated. He had a better target, Duque, who had just used all his strength to kill Lakama Sharktooth. Duke Marcus, recognized as the strongest enemy in the eyes of the orcs. His original titles of Schemer and Sage were all removed. After this battle there was only one label for Duque and that was strong. Just like how there was a famous general above the fierce general and the wise general. In the eyes of all the orcs, Duque was the most worthy human to be hunted. He was like the brightest pearl on the crown. Samuro did not even look back and threw an arrow at Duque, who was bending over and panting. For a moment, Duque thought he might die again. At this time Dalen made his move. He slowly slashed out the scimitar in his right hand. There was no powerful sword aura, nor the shocking power that could split the sea. It was like an ordinary captain waving his sword and ordering the entire ship to open fire. For a moment, Duque thought he would hear the loud but actually useless sound of cannonballs. But there was none. Instead, behind Samuro's high-speed forward body, a huge green ghost ship appeared in the void at high speed. Ghost ship? In this fantastical world, ghosts were not rare. Duque's Karazhan also had a ghost pet called Khadgar. However, this huge specter ship, which was made up of strange negative energy that was close to dark energy, did not have a physical body in the real sense. It was like a phantom that was purely used to scare people. It flew out of the void at high speed and crashed into the back of Samuro, who was also rapidly hiding and dodging outwards. There was a loud sound like a balloon exploding and then it disappeared. It didn't seem to be of any use. A few seconds later, Duque was shocked to see Samuro fall into the sea. This was an orc sword saint hero with an indomitable will. Could it be that he could steal the kill? Mog. Duque was about to summon the Murloc prophet to finish him off, but he suddenly realized that Samuro had just fallen into the sea and was rescued by another sword saint orc. Without even turning his head, he used the wave-like subtle steps to run away from Duque. *CK. This young master's reputation. Duque didn't know what the system notification meant for Kul Dila's reputation and Delen's affection. Anyway, Duque didn't mind doing it if he could gain some reputation in the alliance. Arcane Energy Storm was indeed a move for risking his life. It wasn't something a human could do to overload an already powerful arcane circuit. The chaotic energy was hot and crazy. Duque felt a stabbing pain all over his body and he couldn't even walk. Unable to act cool anymore, Duque could only wait for Kul Dilas to send someone to save him. At first, Duque thought that he could only stand on the ice and wait for 5 minutes. Unexpectedly, a beautiful golden-haired female high elf came. She used flash continuously and landed next to Duque lightly and gracefully. "You're Lady Golden Sword?" Duque recognized her as the female mage who often stayed by Delen's side. Gina Golden Sword nodded slightly at Duque. "Come." Duque immediately sensed that the surrounding frost elements were stirring. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Theoretically, Gina was continuously casting icicles, but Duque felt like he was sitting on a hovercraft. The ice beneath his feet was the boat, and the icicles behind him were the driving force. After being around for so long, Duque finally realized that high-ranked mages could continuously cast icicles and use them as a blower. Looking at Gina Goldensword, Duque really wanted to say, "This is my knee for today. Please keep it." Thanks to Kuldila's court archmage, Duque boarded Dellin's messy flagship in just 3 minutes. Leaning on his machete, Delin smiled at Duque. "I haven't exercised in a long time. Fortunately, my skills haven't deteriorated. But that orc sword saint is quite powerful. If I were 5 years older, I might die for my country." Gina Goldensword glared at Delin. At this moment, the roar of cannons came from afar. Obviously, the ships that had gone to stop the orc transport fleet had engaged in battle. "Let's go over too. If there's anything, let's finish this damn war first." Dellin's words made Duque shudder. From what Duque could tell, Delin was not planning to let go of his old friend from the Bloodsail fleet. Duque gritted his teeth. The Alliance will not let go of any human enemy. Similarly, the Alliance will not mistreat anyone who contributes to the Alliance. This meant that Duque was prepared to protect Duke Fairville to the death. Sigh. Delin sighed as he patted Duque's shoulder. "Duque, I'm not that inflexible. In the face of the threat of the human race's destruction, my personal grudges are nothing. All I want to say is that you don't understand Fairville." Duque suddenly understood. The people who understood you the most were not your family or friends, but your enemies. This was a strange feeling. Duque could not guess what it was, nor did he have the time to guess. The Horde's frenzy had arrived once again. If they did not want the entire northern continent to be flooded by the green tide, they had to first use their naval advantage to weaken the beastmen as much as possible on the surface. A considerable number of male Nagas were arranged to help Duque count the beastmen's warships in the Baladine Bay. The numbers were shocking. There were more than 25,000 transport ships of all sizes. More than half of them were empty ships used as pretenses. There were no more than 10 beastmen laborers and no other beastmen. Even so, there were at least 100,000 laborers in order to control more than 10,000 empty ships. Only the Horde, where human lives were as cheap as ants, would do such a thing. Just as Duque was on Dellin's warship and following Kurtiraz's first fleet to join the battle, a shocking piece of news arrived. The transport ships that rushed out of the Baladine Bay did not all go to South Shore. Instead, they split into 3 groups. About 40% went west, and were expected to land on the South Flow coast. 40% went in the direction of South Shore. The remaining 20% went into the long strait between the northern and southern continents. Duque shuddered. The thing he was most worried about had happened. The beastmen had split up. Chapter 309. Every battleship roared, their cannons flashing with dazzling yellow light. As the huge solid cannonballs were fired, thick smoke rose into the air. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the barrels of the cannons were pushed back violently. Black arcs of light traversed hundreds of meters in the air and bombarded the transport ships. The continuous explosions of cannonballs tore through the air, completely drowning out the roaring sea breeze. Dragging the black arcs of light behind them, the metal balls dancing in the air became unmistakable emissaries of death. Cannonballs were like grim reapers who placed human lives on a scale. The difference was that one side was luck and the other side was death. Whether it was a huge splash that brushed past one's body, or whether it was a direct hit and one was killed in the sea, this was like a metaphysical game. In a sense, being killed by a cannonball was also a kind of luck. At least they did not have to endure this endless torture. The cannonball flew above their heads and fell beside them, creating huge splashes of water. Missed? In less than 2 seconds after the explosion, a new round of horrifying roars was approaching from afar. Did they pray to their ancestors? After drinking the blood of unknown origins and turning their skin green, would their ancestors still bless them? Unknowingly, these seemingly endless cannonballs had become the greatest torture for the orcs. If this was the first time they were fighting on the sea, perhaps the orcs would be dumbfounded and would just paddle the boat forward. But with the first disastrous defeat and the shadow of the landing battle looming over them, the surviving orcs inevitably began to panic. As a paddling ship, the most terrifying thing was that the 2 sides of the ship were not uniform. The direct result of this was the ship spinning around on the sea like a blind fly. The orc fleet was in chaos. It was not that there were no orc commanders who tried to organize small boats to attack the Alliance's fleet, but after Kurtiraz's fleet suffered a huge loss last time, the orc transport ships were no longer blocked by a single row of careless and weak ships. Instead, they were blocked by 2 rows of ships. Not only that, the deranged General Dalin had also changed the structure of half of the fleet. Originally, for the sake of the cannonball battle between fleets, Kurtira's fleet had basically distributed the cannons on the left and right sides equally. Now, considering that they would have to take part in the most brutal battle after the artillery bombardment, Dai Lin moved almost all the cannons to the starboard side. The port side relied on the ballast to maintain the balance of the ship. In other words, as long as the Alliance's fleet could not gain the upper hand and seize the T position, the port side, which only had a few cannons left, would basically be defeated the moment they encountered the enemy. Dai Lin was bold but careful. On one hand, he didn't think that the Bloodsail fleet that had surrendered to the orcs would have much fighting power. On the other hand, he was confident in his commanding skills. Now he had made the right bet. Even an ordinary destroyer could have more than 30 cannons on one side. This kind of firepower was simply crazy. The spherical cannonball spun in the air, and like the punishment of God, it ruthlessly flew towards the small orc transport ship that was trying to rely on its agility to execute the anti-encirclement tactic. Boom. Because of the rush, the materials used in the new batch of transport ships were mostly skimped on. Originally, the Beastman's ships were thick and hard. Now, because of the lack of materials and the excessive pursuit of quantity, even the hardness was gone. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a seemingly huge transport ship to be blasted from the deck to the bottom of the ship by a cannonball. But reality was right in front of them. The coarse and thin deck was easily blasted into the sky, mixed with the broken pieces of wood and orc flesh, splattering in all directions like a storm. There was no need to rely on the explosion of gunpowder, nor was there any need to use the spiral drilling force created by the rifling. Just the pure and violent kinetic energy alone was enough to send a transport ship that could carry dozens or even hundreds of people to the bottom of the sea. The scourge of skimping on materials had also spread to the orcs' giant ironclad transport ships. Originally, with the thick and heavy armor, the cannonball wouldn't be able to cause any substantial damage even if it didn't ricochet. But after the armor was thinned, the pig iron plates that weren't official armor became the biggest killer. The more brittle pig iron was instantly shattered into thumb-sized pieces after being hit by the cannonball, and they splattered into the hold of the ship with the impact of the cannonball. The orc warriors, who were crammed into the hold of the ship like sardines, became the biggest victims. Under this kind of shrapnel attack that exceeded the limits of their physical endurance, large numbers of orcs were killed like wheat being harvested. But most of them were heavily injured and unable to continue fighting. If it was on a land battlefield, the violent and brave orcs would usually choose to perish together with their enemy. However, this was the sea. Other than their own people, there were only the bowl-sized bullet marks left by the stray bullets in the ship's cabins within a radius of a dozen meters. Sitting on Dai Lin's ship, listening to the information sent by the various mages, Duque's expression was still as calm as still water. There's good news and bad news. Dai Lin pursed his lips. A man at sea always starts with the bad news. Alright, the bad news is that you have to decide how to distribute the fleet now. If you let more than 8,000 transport ships land on the South Stream coast, Tarinas and Zeon will immediately come to kill you. And the good news? At this rate, we have a chance to let more than half of the orcs sink to the bottom of the sea to feed the fishes. Dai Lin whistled. I'll leave the Second Fleet and Storm Fleet at South Shore for you to deploy. Leave those that pass through the straits, and I'll pull the rest to the other side of the South Stream coast. Duque pondered for a moment. Dai Lin still refused to let go of the Heartsail pirates, so this was the only way. Promise me. Don't worry, I'll treat them fairly even if they're forced to kill my Third Fleet. Duque stared at Dai Lin for a moment and finally nodded. On the battlefield, the opportunity was fleeting. There was no time to hesitate. The situation here was also reflected in the command center of South Shore. Lothar gritted his teeth and looked at Lang. General Lang, can I give you the best defense line in South Shore? Lang looked at his childhood friend. Lothar's battle in the past year was still vivid in his mind. Lang patted Lothar's shoulder. I'm not a child who has been on the battlefield for the first time. If such a good defense can be penetrated, I'd rather die. No, I don't want you to die, Lang punched Lothar in the chest. Go General Lothar. The Alliance needs you. Without further hesitation, Lothar called out to Turalian. Let's go. Our destination is the South Stream coast. With almost all of his cavalry, Lothar had to reach the Shadowfang citadel before the horde landed. The cruelest battle was about to begin. Chapter 310. At first glance, the attack on South Shore was shockingly similar to the Battle of South Shore the year before. In fact, when Duque received the banner of the tribe, Duque really looked down on the attacking tribes. Simply put, none of them were in the top 10. At first, Duque thought that hanging Blackhand's head would at least attract Blackhand's two brainless sons, Red Blackhand. None. There wasn't even a well-known tribe. The chiefs of the smaller tribes who were loyal to the former chief paid the price for their ignorance. They were all used as pawns by Orgrim to feign an attack. No death knights, no ogres, no warlocks. Duque could imagine that no matter how many of these fools there were, they would not be able to win against South Shore, which had been fortified for more than a year. Do not underestimate the difference between the top 10 tribes and the tribes below, and do not think that the combat power of the orcs was similar. Why was it that the higher-ranked tribes were, the better they were at fighting? Only the most powerful tribes could occupy the best territory and the fattest herds. On the other hand, because of the good territory, they could afford to raise more warriors and tribesmen. This situation was like a rolling snowball. Unless they lost a lot of long-range warriors, it would be difficult for them to decline. Generally speaking, the official warriors of the top 10 tribes, even the females, were rarely less than 2 meters tall. However, the warriors of the tribes below were at most 10% or 20% stronger than the orc laborers. On the morning of the 29th of March, the Second Battle of South Shore began. Duque's face was ashen. It was not because South Shore's defense line was tight. On the contrary, it was impregnable. Lang, the general of the army, still had the time to chat with Duque. What made Duque angry was that Lothar had taken away almost all the elites of the alliance. Those who were left in South Shore were basically infantrymen. There were 80,000 soldiers from Stormwind, 30,000 infantrymen from Lordaeron, Duque's new Storm Mage Legion, and the disorganized Lordaeron's 3rd Cavalry Regiment with only 1,500 cavalrymen. All the other elites, including High Lord Mograine, had been transferred to the south and north stream coasts. How could Lothar do this to me? Didn't I repeatedly tell him not to bet so easily? Before we confirm Orgrim's flag, we can't bet our elites. Duque lost his temper. Lang was slightly stunned. I'm confident that I can defend South Shore. I don't think there's anything wrong with Anduin pulling the other elites away. Also, when Tarinas and Jane heard that there were 200,000 orcs heading that way, they were so worried that they sent at least 10 magic messages an hour. Duque slammed the table and said, "That's the key. I admit that the beastmen wouldn't lie to us. But Orgrim was definitely a leader with brains. He didn't like sacrificing a lot in exchange for so-called glory." In Stormwind City, he was the one who suggested going around the east and north sides of Stormwind City. Duque didn't want to talk about the Battle of Stormwind City either. That was King Lang's eternal pain. Lang's handsome face twitched slightly, but he nodded. Indeed, from then on, I felt that the Horde's actions were often contradictory. One moment it was reckless, the next it was cautious. The reckless one was the mastermind. The cautious one was Orgrim, who was the deputy at the time. Indeed. This also explains why the first battle in South Shore happened. Lang frowned. So you're saying that the main force of the Horde was sent to the other side of the strait? No, those must be empty ships. Duque was very sure. Then, once these ships pass through the strait between the north and south and pass under the Sodder Bridge, they will return to the northeast corner of the wetlands where they can land and carry the Horde over from there. Duque drew a line from the south to the north on the military map. The final destination was the east coast of the hinterlands. Seeing this line, Clayan, General Tom Simois, and General Abendis all sucked in a breath of cold air. The cold air invaded their lungs, making them feel like they were spitting ice cubes out of their mouths and noses. Those who could get to the rank of general were all brainless boors. Of course, everyone knew what this meant. Due to the huge pressure that Lordaeron and King Tarinas Menethil were about to face, Lothar had no choice but to withdraw most of the Alliance's army to deal with the Horde's frontal attack. If the Horde's main army ignored them, the orcs could march straight in and kill their way to Lordaeron's capital within a week, destroying this core kingdom of the Alliance. On the other hand, if they blocked the orcs from the front, the Horde would land in the hinterlands. In this area where the Alliance had no control at all, the Alliance would still collapse if the Horde was allowed to do as they pleased. In the hinterlands, the Horde could fully utilize their advantage in fighting in the mountains. If they headed west, they could directly attack Alterac, which was the weakest of the 7 human kingdoms of the Alliance. If everything went smoothly, they could also go around the hinterlands and Earthy Highlands, which even the orcs could not cross, and attack the Earthy Highlands instead. If they could destroy the defense of Sodder Bridge from the back, they could break through the land blockade of the northern and southern continents, and draw all the orc troops from the southern continent over. If they could deal with Alterac, there would be many options in front of the Horde. They could attack the Stormwind refugee camp in Hillsbrad, or head west to attack the Dalagen. With Lothar withdrawing most of the main army, the horde would be able to move freely. The more Lang and the others watched, the more frightened they became. General Abendis raised a question. Deputy Commander-in-Chief, didn't you ask General Trobane to deploy a large number of catapults and ballistae along the strait? The strait is so narrow that even the horde's empty ships can't easily pass through, right? Duque pursed his lips and said after a long time, I know Orgrim. He must have a way to pass through the strait. Although I don't know why, I have already deployed my strongest long-range troops there. If the situation becomes critical, I will rush over with the Storm Royal family's mages. This was also the sorrow of a transmigrator. Did Duque not know what it was? Of course he knew. The problem was that after Medivh was possessed, Duque could use I can sense evil to explain a lot of things. However, Duque did not have enough evidence to convince the other parties of the Horde's next move. The alliance was not founded by Lothar and Duque. At the end of the day, the alliance was still a collection of kingdoms. Even if Duque had fought a beautiful battle to prove himself, he still could not use intuition, or speculation, to command every army in the alliance. I think this is a typical woodpecker tactic. While creating a diversion, they would drive the enemy to the place they wanted. Chapter 311. Looking at Duque's distressed expression, Lang understood. He patted Duque's shoulder. I believe in you. Believe in you. It was just a few simple words, but they were extremely heavy. This was not the trust of an ordinary person. This was the trust of a king with all the power of the kingdom. Lang used practical actions to show his support for Duque. Tom, I want you to use an elite regiment and a few new regiments to block the Horde's attack on South Shore. Can you do that? Under normal circumstances, General Seamus would definitely spit at this. Sending a rookie regiment to die was a task that could be easily won as long as the main force was deployed. This was a completely blind command. Seamus now understood that Lang was deliberately saving strength for the Battle of the Hinterlands that Duque had mentioned. Seamus nodded. I will withdraw the Griffin regiment as a reserve. Abendis was also very conflicted. He looked at Lang, then at Duque. Recalling all the miracles that Duque had done in the past, he felt a little helpless. All right, I will withdraw my elite regiment as well. Thank you. Duque quickly calculated. With the full support of Lang and Abendis, along with emergency support when necessary, it should be barely enough. Duque turned to his deputy Windsor. Given that the Horde intends to send transport ships through the strait between the northern and southern continents, it is very likely that the Horde will launch an aerial attack on the southern defensive line of Stormguard. At the same time, if the transport ships pass through the strait, the Horde will launch a landing operation targeting the hinterlands. I hope that General Trobane can consider the situation and send more support from Rapidsburg. The earthy highlands and the hinterlands were separated by high mountains, and there were many elemental creatures that ran around and attacked anyone they saw. It was quite troublesome to mobilize troops. Moving troops through the mountains was much more troublesome than moving troops by sea. If they wanted to mobilize troops, they could only do it now. It would be too late. Duque gave the order to Windsor, which meant that he was the Alliance's vice commander-in-chief. This kind of transfer order would not only be communicated through magic, but it would also be sent out by Griffin cavalry. It was the highest level of transfer order that the Alliance had decided internally. Salash Trollbane could choose not to listen out of selfishness, but if there was a problem, his Riptide Castle would cry. After Duque finished speaking, everyone was still worried. Using the Air Force to destroy the ground defense was very effective. It wasn't like everyone had never seen a Griffin before. The Griffin's attack power was also quite terrifying. The problem was that the Alliance didn't have many Griffins. There were only 200 to 300 Griffins in the Alliance combined, and they were usually used as scouts. No king would be willing to send Griffins into the battlefield. Moreover, how could the tribe have a large-scale air force? However, Duque had a confident expression on his face. Lang and the others were puzzled. However, they would soon find out. When they used their unparalleled art of war to repel several waves of orc attacks and replace their troops, something happened to the Sodder Bridge defense line. From the distance, the Horde had entered the strait earlier, but Stromguard's defense line was set up with the Sodder Bridge as the center. This caused the Riptide Castle army to enter the battle a step later than South Shore. Whoosh! The huge projectile vehicle used its long mechanical arm to throw a large basket of rocks the size of a human head at the Horde's transport ship in the center of the strait. The Horde's transport ship hadn't actually entered the firing range yet. Obviously, the Horde laborers inside were frightened or for some other reason. A large number of transport ships stopped outside the firing range of the Riptide Castle's long-range weapons. Haha. I didn't expect the Horde to actually send transport ships. I thought this line of defense was wasted. The soldiers from Riptide Castle laughed loudly. During the time they guarded the Solder Bridge, the Riptide Castle people used a large number of ballistae, catapults, and cannons, and actually trained batches of engineers, artillerymen, and ballistae who were very good at operating. This was an unexpected gain. After all, these people were originally just farmers. King Salash Trollbane was a man who knew his soldiers well. As the first human country to receive the attack report among the 6 northern kingdoms, King Salas had always attached great importance to the orcs. After receiving the official transfer order from Duque, Salas immediately agreed to Duque's request. He obeyed the transfer order and sent an integrated infantry regiment of 5,000 soldiers to Duque. In addition, he urgently mobilized a large number of ballistae and 5 archer companies to the Solder Bridge defense line, forming a deep formation to deal with the possible air attack. Air attack? What air attack? The Riptide Castle soldiers and generals were all confused. They just followed the order in a daze. According to the Alliance's deputy commander's order, all archers and ballistae had to be spread out. The same went for the ballistae. Before firing, the ballistae should be covered with a large number of branches and leaves to hide. What the hell was this? This completely subverted the military common sense of this era. Humans were not like the elves. Unless they were hunters or elites who had trained for more than 3 years, most human archers were terrible at shooting. Ordinary arrows would not be able to hit more than 20 meters away. Often, they could only rely on sharpshooters to lead the way and fire at a certain area on a large scale to make up for their lack of marksmanship. A scattered archer had no power to speak of. This was common knowledge in the military of the human race. Now, the archers of the Riptide Castle were scattered, carrying doubts. They were even more puzzled as to why most of the ballistae on the edge of the cliff were incomplete or broken, and a large number of straw men wearing the armor of the Riptide Castle soldiers. It did not take long for their doubts to be resolved. The Horde really had an air force. Look! Following the exclamation of an archer, countless people saw many black dots appear in the horizon against the rising sun. In just a few breaths, these black dots rapidly enlarged in their field of vision, turning into black flying birds with their wings spread wide. However, they were already so big even though they were so far away in the sky. One could only imagine their true size. Stay calm. Stay calm. Stay at your posts. Everything is within Deputy Commander Duque's expectations. For a moment, no one knew which officer shouted like this. Miraculously, the restless and panicked army quickly calmed down. Duke Marcus, a magical name. This name represented the bloody heads of more than 200,000 orcs, and also represented the Alliance's victory. Thinking of the previous strange arrangement, the soldiers suddenly realized that their commander had expected this. The soldiers did not have such a long-term vision. As long as they knew that this was a prepared battle, they would not panic so easily. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.